have quorum, please ensure your video is turned on. We're convening this meeting by electronic means under the Emergency Program Act, order number M192, and we're all participating by phone due to this order. If my connection is lost during any portion of this public hearing, we'll recess until my connection is restored, and that goes for council as well, as we're required to hear the entirety of the meeting before making a decision. I do hear folks that aren't muted, so just a reminder to check your mute buttons, and if you're not speaking, to stay on mute. That's staff as well. Please let the clerk know if you're going to leave the meeting at any time, just so we can maintain quorum. And this meeting will continue with audio only, as council are participating by phone. However, the public can listen to the proceedings via the live stream and YouTube link, which will be tweeted out at Van City Clerk on Twitter. Presentations, amendments, and vote results will be projected to viewers when available. Lastly, we have speakers who will be providing comments to council by phone, and a moderator will assist in patching the speakers through when their turn comes up. So, Clerk, can we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Stewart in the chair. Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor DiGenova. Councillor DiGenova did say she would be joining by phone. Councillor DiGenova. Councillor Fry.
Here.
Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Wiebe.
Present.
Councillor Boyle.
Present.
Councillor Dominato. Councillor Dominato.
Hi there.
Hi. Councillor Bly.
Present.
Councillor Kirby Young. The meeting has quorum. Mayor Stewart.
Thanks very much, Clerk. First, we acknowledge we're on the unceded traditional territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, and thank them for their generosity to all who live, work, and play in Vancouver. And of course, we have awesome staff here at the City of Vancouver, and just want to acknowledge their great work. Before we begin, I have some announcements. The speakers have 5 minutes to make their comments and should limit their comments to the merits of the report being considered. Also very helpful if speakers state whether they support or oppose the recommendations. And we do have on our speakers list now whether folks are residents of Vancouver, but in case for people that are joining at the end, I will ask to clarify that. Speakers may only speak once and should follow along on Twitter at Van City Clerk for updates on the progress of the meeting so they don't miss their turn to speak. Any comments on the agenda item can be submitted in writing to our online web forum at vancouver.ca/public hearing comments. And that link will be tweeted out so you can click to make your comments. Speakers who pre-registered with presentations are reminded that the public live feed has a slight delay, and so to navigate through the slides, please say the word next, and I'll prompt folks who have presentations to do so. If we don't conclude from hearing from all speakers this evening, we'll recess and reconvene the meeting on Wednesday, October 28th at 3 p.m. A reminder that Council's role of public hearing is to be a quasi-judicial body, which means that Council is only to consider the merits of the rezoning application or heritage designation. Council members may ask clarifying questions from speakers, including the applicant or technical advice from staff, which should save debate for after the close of speakers. After we hear from the speakers, we can 1, approve in principle the application, 2, refuse the application, 3, defer the application for further consideration. So first up is zoning and development bylaw amendments to allow temporary patios for business on private property. And just want to ask first if anyone wants to declare a conflict of interest on this item.
Yes, Mayor Stewart, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest because of the properties that I have interest in at 151 East 8th Avenue and 7th and Alexander and Gastown.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wiebe. So we'll just ask, perhaps the clerks can put you in the waiting room, and then we'll call you back when we get to the next item.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So the clerk will now read the application and summary of correspondence. Please go ahead, clerks.
Just give us a second, please, Mayor Stewart.
No problem.
This is an application by the General Manager of Planning, Urban Design and Sustainability to amend the zoning and development bylaw to extend the temporary allowance of outdoor patios for businesses on private property from October 31st, 2020 to October 31st, 2021, and to grant the Director of Planning discretionary power to vary other regulations to enable enclosure of patios. The following correspondence has been received since referral to public hearing and prior to the close of the speakers list and receipt of public comments. 2 pieces of correspondence in support, 0 in opposition, and 1 in the other category. And this represents all correspondence received up until 3:30 p.m. today.
Thank you very much. Council, we have no speakers to this item. Staff could do a presentation, so what I'll just suggest that we'll waive the presentation unless anybody on council would like to see it. So just let me know verbally if you'd like to see it, otherwise we'll move on. I don't hear anybody, so staff, thanks for that. Is there, we don't have an applicant team to speak to this application, so if there are any questions to staff, council, just please put yourself on the queue, and we can ask questions. I don't see anybody on the queue. Okay, council, since there are no questions on this item, I'm going to do the first of 3 calls for anybody who'd like to speak to this item. So there are speakers who'd like to speak to council on this item. Please call toll-free 1-833-353-8610, followed by participant code 43311 hashtag to get on the list. And the number will be tweeted out and available on the live stream. So, clerk, so just check and see if there are any speakers on the line or in the chambers for this item on this first call.
Mayor Stewart, we have no speakers.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to make a second call then. If there's any speakers who wish to speak to this item, please call toll-free 1-833-353-8610, followed by participant code 43311 hashtag to get on the list. And this is the second call for speakers. What I'm going to do, council, is just check with the clerks one more time. If there's anybody on the line, make the third call, and then we'll take a 5-minute break just to give people a chance to phone in if they want. Clerks, any speakers?
Status remains the same. No one in the chamber and no one on the line, Mayor Stewart.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to call one more time for speakers, 1-833-353-8610, code 43311 hashtag to get on the list. That's the third call, and then council, it is 6:08, so let's come back at 6:13. We'll proceed to debate and decision. So thanks, council. We'll see you at 6:13. Clerks, I'm just going to check with you. Is there anybody here to speak to this item?
There is no one in the chamber, Mayor Stewart, and I'm waiting for my message. No one on the line.
Great. Thanks very much, Council. So I'm going to now just flip over to my other script. Right. So as few or no public comments were received on this item after 5 p.m. today, I said yes, we now close the receipt of public comments and on to hearing closing comments, asking further questions of staff and to make a decision. Does staff have any closing comments?
Chris Robertson, Assistant Director, Citywide and Regional Planning. Mayor and Council, we do not have any additional closing comments.
Thanks very much. And I'm just going to check if there are any questions from Council to staff. Please put yourself on the list. I don't see anybody on the list. So,
seeing none, Mayor Stewart, happy to move the recommendation. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. We have a seconder on this.
Second, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. We'll move over to the queue. Would anybody like to speak? We're in the debate portion of this. Any debates or comments? I don't see anybody on the queue. So, clerks, I'll call the vote on this item now. If you could please mark Councillor Wiebe absent for a declaration of conflict. Thanks, Councillor Bly and Councillor DeGenova. There we go. Clerk, so that vote is completed and it's unanimous in favor. If you just pull that up on the screen. Thanks, Council.
Are you seeing it on the screen, Mayor Stewart? This is the clerk.
I haven't got my little cone open here, but I'll just take a quick look. Just take me a second. Just taking a second to load here. Yes, that's on screen. Thanks, clerks. So, Council, we're going to move to our next item, item number 2. Actually, sorry, we have to approve the bylaws for this now. So we have bylaw 1 on the agenda, which is subject to approval of item 1. So that's the one we've just passed. And you, if Councillor Wiebe's here, you may want to, I'm not sure if you are, but you'd want to excuse yourself for the same conflict as it's a related item. And clerks, is Councillor Wiebe still absent?
Mayor Stewart, this is the clerk. Councillor Wiebe is still removed from the meeting. He will come back after the bylaw.
Great. Okay. So does anybody wish to hold this item for debate? I'm just going to pull up the screen here. I don't see any questions. So would someone like to move the adoption of bylaw 1? And I can read this out. That
Councillor Boyle.
Thanks to Councillor Boyle. That Council enact bylaw 1 entitled a bylaw to amend zoning and development bylaw number 3575 regarding temporary patios. Enactment of the attached bylaw will implement Council's resolution and authorize the Mayor and City Clerk to sign and seal the enacted bylaw. We have a seconder for this.
Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. We're going to do yeas and nays. All those in favor say yay.
Yay. Yay.
Opposed, nay. Opposed, nay. Okay, I hear no nays, so that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. a bylaw to amend zoning and development bylaw number 3575 regarding temporary patios. Enactment of the bylaw will implement council's resolution, and that is approved. Okay, council, we're on to item number 2, heritage designation at 1215 West 16th Avenue, the Baldwin residence. Does anybody wish to declare a conflict of interest on item 2? And just while I'm there, clerks, could you readmit Councillor Weeb?
It is the clerk here, and we're just bringing him back into the meeting, Mayor Stewart.
Okay.
I'll just confirm.
He's on. He's on, yep.
Councillor Weeb should be on the line now.
Great. So we're just dealing with the item number 2, Councillor Weeb, the heritage designation on the West 16th. And the clerk will now read the application, a summary of correspondence.
This is an application by the General Manager of Planning, Urban Design and Sustainability to secure the long-term heritage designation protection of the structure and exterior of the building at 1215 West 16th Avenue, the Baldwin residence, listed on the Vancouver Heritage Register under the B evaluation category, with a relaxation to the RT2 multiple dwelling guidelines to reduce the maximum allowable frontage for the development of 2 duplex infill dwellings. No correspondence has been received on this application since it was referred to public hearing and prior to the close of the speakers list and receipt of public comments.
Thanks very much. Council is slightly different. We don't have a, where I'm going to just read, oh, actually it's the same, so forget that. So if anybody wants to speak to this, please call toll-free 1-833-353-8610, code 43311 to get on the list. And we have Hugh McLean from the Planning and Urban Design Sustainability to present the application. Staff, council, I think we could also waive this application unless someone would like to see it. So if you verbally let me know if you'd like, that's, and if not, we can just move on. I don't hear that, so staff are going to waive this application, but clerks, I don't believe there's an applicant team here to speak to this, is there?
The clerk here, Mayor Stewart, and no.
Okay, great. So I'm going to move on to questions to staff from council. Any questions, please put yourself on the queue.
Gosh, you just waved it, boom. Usually.
I don't see anybody on the queue for questions. So now we're going to hear from the public. If there are any speakers to this item who wish to speak to council, please call 1-833-353-8610, code 43311, hashtag to get on the list. Let's see, I'm just going to look at the list here. Clerks, and I don't see any speakers, so that will be my first call for speakers. Are there anybody on the line, clerks, to speak to this item?
Mayor Stewart, I see no one on the line, and there is no one in the chamber.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to make my second call. If there's anyone who'd like to speak to this item, please call 1-833-353-8610, followed by participant code 43311, hashtag to get on the list. And I'm just looking, clerks at the, yeah. So if you do, this is what's posted on the screen, these contact details. So if you want to speak to any items tonight in public hearing, those are the numbers and the code to use. Okay. And anybody on the line, clerks?
No one on the line, Mayor Stewart, and no one in the chamber.
Thanks very much. I'm going to call the third time then. Anybody wishes to speak to this, please call 1-833-353-8610, code 43311, hashtag to get on the list. And council, we're going to take 5 minutes to just see if anybody has time to call in. And it's 6:21, so let's come back at 6:26 for the final call, debate, and decision. Okay, thanks, council.
is the clerk here, and there is no one in the chamber, and I'm getting my message now. Nobody on the line to speak to this item.
Okay, thanks so much. So we're going to close the receipt of public comments and move to debate and decision. The staff have any closing comments on this?
No, Your Honor, we don't. Thanks.
Thanks. Council, any questions to staff? I don't see anybody on the queue. Okay, so we're going to move debate and decision. Can I have a mover for this recommendation, please?
Happy to move, Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. We have a seconder.
Second, Councillor Carr.
Thanks very much. Any debate? I've got, just put yourself on the queue. I don't see anybody up for debate, so we're going to have a vote. Then, clerk, if you could call the voting queue up. Councillor Weave and Councillor Dominato. Councillor Weave. There's Councillor Weave. We need you to vote on this one. Great. And clerks, if you can pull that up on the screen, that is unanimous in favor. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to item 3. This is item 3 is the rezoning on West 45th Avenue. Does any council member wish to declare conflict of interest on item 3? I don't hear anybody declaring conflict, so I'll ask the clerk now to read the application and summary of correspondence.
This is an application by Iredale Architecture to rezone 376406 West 45th Avenue from RS1 One Family Dwelling District to RM 8A Multiple Dwelling District to permit a townhouse development with a floor space ratio of up to 1.2. If rezoning is approved, a subsequent development permit process would entail a review of a proposed form of development. The General Manager of Planning, Urban Design and Sustainability recommends approval subject to conditions set out in the summary and recommendation of the public hearing agenda. No correspondence has been received on this application since it was referred to public hearing and prior to the close of the speakers list and receipt of public comments.
Thanks very much. Let's see, I'm just going to check the list here of speakers. And right, there's no speakers to this one, Council. So we have Austin Norrie here from the Rezoning Center. But unless, we'll waive the presentation unless someone on Council would like to see it. And just let me know verbally. Okay. Thanks. So we're going to move on. I'm going to ask, is the applicant team here to speak to the application?
Peter Hildebrand from Iredale here.
Great. And do you want to present anything, or are you just happy to?
Yeah, there's nothing really to present at this time. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So, Council, if you want to ask questions to staff or the applicants, this is the time to ask your question for applicants. Please put yourself on the queue. I don't see anybody on the queue, so I'm going to move to calling hearing from the public. If you'd like to speak to this item, 1-833-353-8610, code 43311 hashtag to get on the list. And I'm going to ask the clerks, is there anybody on the line to speak to this item?
Mayor Stewart, it is the clerk here, and we have no one in the chamber, and we have no one on the line.
Okay, so I'm going to call a second time then. Anyone who wants to speak to this item, please call toll-free 1-833-353-8610, participant code 43311 to get on the list. And that number, if you missed it, is being tweeted out and is also on the live stream feed. And on this second call, is there anybody on the list, clerks?
It is the clerk, Mayor Stewart, and the status remains the same. No one in the chamber, no one on the line for this item.
Thanks very much, Council. So then I'm going to call the third and final time for those who want to speak to this, 1-833-353-8610, code 43311 hashtag, with all that information on the live stream and on Twitter. And it is 6:30 on the dot, so we'll come back at 6:35, or we can hear any speakers that may have signed up during that 5 minutes and for debate and decision. Thanks, Council. We'll see you at 6:35.
Mayor Stewart, it is the clerk here. We have no one here for this item in person. And I'm just waiting for my note to come through, and no one on the line for this item.
Okay, thanks very much. So we're going to close the receipt of public comments and move to questions and decision. Applicant have any closing comments at all? You might be on mute. Clerks, do we have the applicant on the line here?
I'm just double checking, Mayor Stewart, if you give me a moment.
Thanks. And I'll just ask at this point if council has any questions for staff, just to put yourself on the list and we can ask those questions.
Mayor Stewart, this is the clerk here. The applicant is on the line, but apparently was muted.
Okay, just asking if the applicant has any closing comments.
That's Peter Hildebrand here. No, we have no closing comments at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. And I don't see any questions from council to staff, so I'll ask somebody to move this recommendation.
So moved. Councillor Carr.
Second, Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Dejanova. Thanks very much. If there's any debate, please put yourself on the queue. And I don't see anybody on the queue, council, I don't think. Great. So we'll move to a vote on this issue, on this item. Just pull out the queue. There we go. Councillor.
Point of privilege, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please go ahead.
Councillor Dejanova, I'll need a vote assist in favor as my panel's reloading. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Clerks, if you can mark that, great. And if you pull up the voting screen, clerks, thanks very much. This is unanimous in favor. Thank you very much, council. And we're going to move on to item 4. Great. Council, this is item 4 is the amendment to the Regional Context Statement Official Development Plan Bylaw for 1580 Vernon Drive. If any member wants to declare a conflict of interest, please let me know. Okay, so the clerk will now read the application and summary respondents received.
This is an application by the General Manager of Planning, Urban Design and Sustainability to amend the Regional Context Statement Official Development Plan Bylaw to temporarily change the designation at 1580 Vernon Drive from industrial to general urban. The city-owned property has been identified as a potential site for temporary modular housing project. The following correspondence has been received since the referral to public hearing and prior to the close of the speakers list and receipt of public comments. 1 piece of correspondence in support, 3 pieces of correspondence in opposition, and 3 pieces of correspondence dealing with other aspects of the application, and this represents all correspondence received up to 3:30 p.m. today.
Thanks. I'm just going to check with the clerks. Do we have speakers listed for this item? Are they on the phone or in person here?
Mayor Stewart, this is the clerk here, and we have 2 speakers registered. One is in person and here ready to go when council is ready, and the second is on the line.
Great. So we'll then move ahead. Yardley McNeil is here from the Rezoning Center who has a presentation, and we'll move on with the presentation. So over to to Yardley McNeil whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's Yardley McNeil, Senior Planner with the Planning Department's Rezoning Center, and I'll be making the presentation tonight. The proposal is to amend the Regional Context Statement Official Development Plan Bylaw for 1580 Vernon Drive to permit the Director of Planning to consider a future temporary modular housing development at this location. The lack of affordable housing in Vancouver has compromised the poor, marginalized, and homeless from finding secure and safe housing. Council has recently confirmed this top priority, noting the 2020 homeless count found more than 2,000 people in Vancouver are without a home. In 2017, Council adopted policies to support the delivery of social housing in the form of temporary modular housing as one measure to address the homelessness crisis. To date, 11 temporary modular projects have been developed, creating 664 homes for the city's most marginalized. Temporary modular housing has been built on both public and private lands. Each of these sites is governed by a time-limited permit for a maximum duration of 10 years. At Council's direction, staff reviewed thousands of locations to host temporary modular housing. Their criteria for a suitable site included site size, topography, access to transit and local services, environmental conditions, and existing zoning provisions. Based on this criteria, staff identified the city-owned site at 1580 Vernon Drive as a suitable location. Although the local I-2 zoning conditionally permits residential uses, the current industrial land use designation within the Regional Context Statement bylaw precludes the Director of Planning from considering this site for temporary modular housing. In 2011, the Greater Vancouver Regional District Board, in consultation with Lower Mainland municipalities, adopted a bylaw to set sustainability goals for the region. This document, titled the Regional Growth Strategy Bylaw, Metro Vancouver 2040, Shaping Our Future, is a strategy to promote human settlement that is socially, economically, and environmentally healthy and makes efficient use of public facilities and services, land, and other resources. The strategy focuses on land use policies to support the future development of the region in line with stated sustainability goals. Following adoption of the Regional Growth Strategy, each municipality was charged with developing a regional context statement that embodied the goals of the strategy and aligned with local land use provisions. The regional strategy is updated periodically with a pending amendment planned to extend the approach to 2050. The city's Regional Context Statement Official Development Plan bylaw was adopted in 2013 and sets out regional land use designations consistent with the regional strategy. The bylaw prescribes land use designations in the following categories: industrial, mixed employment, conservation and recreation, agricultural, and general urban. The general urban designation is the only land use designation in the bylaw that permits residential uses. The city is permitted to make minor amendments to the designations through a flexibility clause contained in the bylaw. Amendments are required to proceed through a public hearing, provided prior consultation with Metro Vancouver has occurred. Following Council's approval through a public hearing, the amendment is sent to the Metro Vancouver Board for approval to amend their bylaw. The city has used the flexibility clause on a number of occasions. For example, the amendment in 2017 for a site at 1115 Franklin Street for the purpose of delivering temporary modular housing, and in 2019 for the delivery of social housing at 1636 Clark Drive directly east of this site. City staff have been mindful of the rules around the flexibility clause, noting a maximum aggregate change of 2% to a land use designation may be amended, and each amendment is limited to a maximum site area of 1 hectare. The recommended amendment would fall within the flexibility provisions of the Regional Context Statement ODP bylaw. The site at 1580 Vernon Drive is within the Metro Core area of the Regional Context Statement bylaw and part of a larger industrial zone along Terminal Avenue west of Clark Drive. Should Council approve the amendment to the bylaw, a future recommendation to return the land use designation back to the industrial category would be brought to Council when the temporary modular housing buildings were removed from the site as a way of protecting the industrial capacity of the area. 1580 Vernon Drive is contained within the city's I-2 industrial district schedule, which restricts development to uses compatible with an industrial nature. Residential uses are permitted on a conditional base in this area. Should Council approve the staff recommendation to amend the bylaw, only the bylaw would be amended. The existing I-2 zoning would remain in place. With respect to the delivery of temporary modular housing, opportunities to deliver these units have been delegated to the Director of Planning, including consideration in I-2 zones through a development permit process. While the city's zoning development bylaw allows the Director of Planning to consider temporary modular housing at 1580 Vernon Drive, the Regional Context Statement bylaw does not, due to the nature of the industrial land use designation. It is for this reason that the first step in considering 1580 Vernon Drive for temporary modular housing is Council's approval of the Regional Context Statement bylaw amendment. The 3-lot parcel at 1580 Vernon Drive has an aggregate land area of approximately 60,000 square feet and is currently vacant. The grade level is approximately 2 to 3 stories below the level of the intersection at Clark Drive and the terminus of the Grandview Viaduct. This site is adjacent to 2 major transit arterials on Clark Drive and East 1st, and within walking distance of the subway transit station at East 5th Avenue off Clark Drive. The Commercial Drive retail and commercial uses are 3 blocks to the east, supplying grocery stores and other local serving businesses. Should Council approve the bylaw amendment, the Vancouver Affordable Housing Agency, commonly known as VAHA, would submit a development permit application for consideration by the Director of Planning. Council is not being asked whether 1580 Vernon Drive is an appropriate location for temporary modular housing. As noted earlier, that authority rests with the Director of Planning and is determined through the development permit process. Council is being asked to clear the way for the Director of Planning to consider the site at 1580 Vernon Drive as a potential location for temporary modular housing through amending the Regional Context Statement ODP bylaw. The process begins with Council's approval of the amendment to the Regional Context Statement bylaw to general urban designation to allow for residential uses. The next step is a development permit application for consideration by the Director of Planning. The Director of Planning will assess the application against all applicable policies and guidelines and Council's stated objectives around temporary modular housing and the homelessness crisis. Prior to a decision, the Director of Planning will instruct staff to consult with the local area and provide them with an opportunity to view the drawings for the proposed development. In closing, staff recommend Council approve the amendment to the Regional Context Statement Official Development Plan bylaw for 1580 Vernon Drive from industrial to general urban for the purpose of allowing the site to be considered for a future temporary modular housing development. This concludes our presentation. We have a number of staff online tonight and are happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Do have two councillors on the queue to ask questions. And just a reminder, Council, that you can ask questions to staff at this point and also after we hear the speakers. I'll move on to Councillor Dominato first for up to 5 minutes. Please go ahead, Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I was curious, appreciate this is coming forward because of the identification of land for modular housing and the need to have that shift to general urban within our context plan. Is there ever been a time when we've had a bit of a hybrid, so you have general urban and industrial, and I'm thinking contextually around obviously the need to provide housing, and modular has been identified as a means of doing that, but to also have light industrial or other services on site as well in support of employment. And I'm just wondering if that exists, that kind of hybrid.
Thank you for the question. Not to my knowledge, just to be clear, the zoning doesn't change. It stays as I-2 and would permit industrial in concert with temporary modular housing if that was a desired approach. We do have staff on the phone tonight, Alison Dunnett, who may be able to respond as well.
Hi, Alison Dunnett. I'm Senior Planner, Arts, Culture and Community Services. I will defer to the team in regulation policy around the RCS, but I would just flag that in the past, at one of our other temporary modular housing sites, adjacent to that was a community garden that was able to continue its work in that space that had been on those lands before. So we have worked on the TMH side to try and find opportunities to collaborate around employment and particularly around community gardens and those pieces. Maybe other staff from planning have comment.
Hi, this is Ingrid Huang, planner with the Citywide and Regional Planning Division. General urban land use designation allows for a variety of uses, including industrial and mixed employment uses. So if desired, there could be a mixture of both residential and employment uses on the site.
Okay, thank you. I had another question, I've forgotten it, so I'll let other councillors go ahead and maybe after the speakers I can come back. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Kirby, go to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Got a couple. Just following up on Councillor Dominato, with the designation change from the temporary change from industrial to general urban, up to a maximum of 10 years. So I just want to clarify that I heard that the designation does not change and it will remain as industrial on conclusion of the 10 years. Is that correct? Or whenever the TMH might be relocated?
Thank you for the question. The designation is being amended tonight through the recommendation, so it would change from industrial to general urban. But at the point that the temporary modular housing is removed from the property, and remember TMH is limited to a maximum of 10 years, then staff would come back to council and reverse the designation back to industrial in order to protect the industrial capacity in the area.
Okay, and that's sort of following up on that, because that, excuse me, speaks to the heart of my concern around maintaining the very little industrial land base that we have left in the city. Can you comment on plans in this area in terms of area plans and that for future potential use of the site after the TMH? Do we see that remaining as industrial use?
Yes, we would at this time, but of course we are about to head into a Vancouver plan where full understanding of the city will be explored at that time. At this point, we don't foresee that the industrial character of that area would change significantly.
Okay, thank you. And then one additional question on another topic is council did receive one piece of correspondence from an area resident that had made comment around the strong massing of social housing. And these are words that I'm utilizing from the correspondence we received, recognizing it's going to be in proximity to some existing social housing projects as well as a new withdrawal management center. And the comment in the communication we received was concern around not creating mixed neighborhoods with co-op, rental, supportive housing and others, and having too much massing there as opposed to creating sort of diversified neighborhoods with different housing types. Does staff have comment on that?
Alison Dunnett, Senior Planner, Arts, Culture, Community Services. This is a question that sometimes comes into us. It's sometimes described as a question around concentration of supportive housing in an area. In alignment with our principles of equity and anti-discrimination, local area plans and policies do not include maximums or exclusionary bounds for housing for lower income renters and or residents who are formerly homeless. In an effort to ensure the city can meet affordable housing delivery goals, local area plans often include minimum targets for creating non-market homes with an ambition actually to exceed those minimums wherever possible with senior government funding. Housing Vancouver's goal is to build the right supply of housing, which includes 12,000 social and supportive homes over the next 10 years due to the large unmet need of affordable and supportive housing for Vancouverites, and as already referenced, for our homeless neighbors. The local area and surrounding communities of these sites includes a wonderful diversity of housing, both in form and tenure, including ownership, single family, rental apartments, condominiums, co-ops, and social housing.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that staff would support building diverse neighborhoods, obviously in addition to providing the much needed social housing, but staff don't feel that this neighborhood has too much massing in terms of social, that we're not striking a balance with other housing types. Is that correct?
There is no intensification in any way of social or supportive housing in this neighborhood. It is a robust, diverse neighborhood with a variety of housing typologies.
Okay. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick.
Thanks. I'm going to go over the map here. Let's start with the ground that this is laid on. This is an infill. What are the risks of liquefaction in the case of an earthquake? Since this would be temporary modular housing, it would be quite fragile in comparison. Have you done an evaluation around the seismic reliability of the soil?
Thank you for the question. That could be one of the things we'll explore through the development permit process and determining the geological structure of the grade that it's sitting on. To date, there have been some explorations by staff and by FAHA, and they haven't identified any of those issues, but it could definitely would be part of the development permit process for review.
It seems to me that we should check the land that we're looking at building this on, since this is infill and as well known in this area. My second question is looking at if you could put back up the view. I think it was the first or second slide that showed it. I think it showed the greenhouses and the green space on the property. I'd just like clarification on what is there in terms of trees and foliage currently.
There are a number of trees on site, and there's an anticipation that a portion of those would be removed for the development. but also anything along the perimeter could be saved because temporary modular housing does not require excavating to the degree that permanent construction does. So we do anticipate that we'll be able to save a portion of those trees and possibly add to it as required as well.
It's not that one. There was maybe the next, that one, perfect. Go back one. There you go. Okay, so we're looking at all those trees on the right side. Do you have a number, age of, and what do we know about those trees?
We don't have a full exploration as yet. Again, that would be part of the development permit process review, where we could be looking at an arborist study and determining what's possible. At this point, we're anticipating that it's likely there'll be removal of 10 trees, with the remaining not disturbed, but again, that needs to be confirmed through the development permit process.
10 trees. What about sidewalks and access around the property? As we can see from this image as well, we've got the Grandview Viaduct, Clark Drive. Are there sidewalks? What kind of accessibility is there for pedestrian traffic?
Yes, we are considering and looking at that now. We note that there would be a new sidewalk along Vernon Drive and one that would be along the side of the property to bring pedestrians up onto Clark Drive. The design of those obviously happened through the DP process, but they're being considered now.
I would comment on what we're looking at. We've got 97 units of social housing in the detox center across the street on the northeast corner. We've got an entire city block of social housing east of 2nd and McLean, 3/4 of a block of social housing. The Vancouver Native Housing Society operates on Gravely Street. And you're saying in all of this that you don't feel that there is a concentration that might be better distributed throughout other parts of the city in terms of determining locations for temporary modular housing.
Alison Dennett, Senior Planner, ACCF. No, in our planning work, we do not plan for maximums of social or supportive housing. And the question is actually quite challenging for staff to answer in that we don't exclude by income in a neighborhood. So there is not and has not been in any of our area plans any kind of notion that we can only have a maximum amount of social or supportive housing in a community.
I wouldn't expect, and we are dealing with unprecedented situations, but we also can see what there will be perhaps unintended consequences. Anyhow, I think I'm probably close to my time on that, and I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Carr, up to 5 minutes.
Yes. Yep. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm just interested in a sort of bigger picture question, which is any changes to our regional context statement in industrial or removing industrial land classification normally goes to the board of the Metro Vancouver for approval. Would this also have to go through that process?
Hi, Ingrid Huang, Citywide and Regional Planning. Within the RGS, there's a flexibility clause that enables municipalities to have some discretion in to do changes that will not require the full board process. So as Yardley mentioned, this amendment would fit into the criteria as set out in the regional growth strategy for the flexibility clause. So this would only be an administrative notice to Metro Vancouver.
Can you go over again what the criteria are that enables a decision not to have to be made by the board of Metro Vancouver?
So we can redesignate from one regional land use designation to another land use designation if the area is not, if it does not exceed 1 hectare. And it is also within our 2% limit for that land use designation as well.
Within two, explain that to me. And within 2% use for that land designation. What?
Yes. So for each land use in the city, we have we can only convert a maximum of 2% of that total land base.
And how much of industrial, or have we converted any industrial land base, or if so, how much of that land base is currently being converted?
So we, as Yardley has mentioned, we have converted a couple of locations, including the previous temporary modular location at 1115 Franklin, as well as the social housing detox center across the street at Clark and First Avenue. So those are the two industrial lands that we have completed. This accounts, including this application, it would account for about 10% of our maximum limit for industrial land.
So 10% of 2%?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's great. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thanks so much. Councillor Swanson, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that we don't talk about massing of upper income people or an entire block of upper income housing or a concentration of upper income housing.
Councillor Swanson, this is a debate. These are questions to staff. If you want a debate, will be after we hear from the public.
I just wanted to really appreciate our staff's answer about not having maximums of social housing in any neighborhood.
Okay, I'd save that for debate. Do you have any questions for staff on this site?
Nope.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Okay, Council, that's it for questions in this round to staff and clerks. We're going to move on to the public, hearing from the public, and I believe we have, let me just check here. We have Stephen Boas.
Yes, Mayor Stewart, this is the clerk here. Stephen Boas is just coming to the podium.
My slides.
And we're preparing his slides.
Great.
So Mayor Stewart, it is the clerk here again. The slides will not be on WebEx. They are on the streaming and the VLC cone.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll just direct.
I have sent it to all members of council, so you have it personally as well, in case you want to follow like that.
Great. And so, Mr. Boas, you know the drill here. You have up to 5 minutes, and whenever you're ready, I'll start your timer.
Okay, well, thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Stephen Boas. I have a degree in landscape architecture, and I live in Grandview Woodland. And what you're really considering is temporary modular housing like this, a 2-unit setup on that site. And I'm going to ask, is 1580 Vernon a suitable site for temporary modular housing? Next slide, please. I support temporary modular housing in appropriate locations, such as putting it at Adanac and Commercial, and this housing could go there. Next slide, please. This slide of 1580 Vernon Drive actually shows that there were greenhouses there, and the staff presentation says it's currently vacant and underutilized. Well, that's because the greenhouses were moved away, and I think that was actually a very good use for urban agriculture. Next slide. Okay, if we look at the site, there aren't any sidewalks, and it's not very easy to retrofit sidewalks either. There are lilacs, there are telephone posts there. It's not a trivial thing. Next slide. There's no direct access to First or to Clark Drive. Next slide. Quickest way to get there is actually to go down East 2nd Avenue and look at the extreme slope here. So if you have mobility issues, you can't walk on the sidewalk, you have to go on the street, and then you can't walk up the sidewalk, you have to go up the steep incline. Next slide, please. And you can see how steep it is on 2nd. There is actually no through street at Greeley, so you would have to go to Grant in the other direction.
Clerk, excuse me, Mr. Boas. Yeah, there we go. We're just, clerk, there we go. We're on the right slide. Please continue.
Okay, next slide. There's the issue of the fishbowl and privacy for future residents. So you can actually look down and look in from either from Clark Drive or from the Grandview Viaduct. And there's a very big issue of privacy for the residents if we want to treat them with dignity on the site. Next slide. This is a former shoreline. I heard the questions about liquefaction, so I won't go into it. I'll just mention that there aren't any permanent foundations for temporary modular housing, so it actually is above grade. And it's very prone to liquefaction. Next slide. There's a silt recovery site right across the street at 1599 Vernon Drive. There's a lot of dust that blows. There are trucks that are lined up. This wasn't mentioned by staff. Next slide. There's a very noisy, busy railway corridor with pollution right there, very close to the drive, to the site. And I'm very concerned that this is not a suitable site. Next slide. And it is an industrial area, and this should be protected industrial land. It is, in some sense, sacred land, like we have very little of industrial land base left. Next slide. There's an incredibly high volume of traffic at First and Clark in both directions, the safety issues as well as the mobility issues I mentioned in terms of getting there and on. Next slide. There's a lot of social housing. I heard what Councillor Swanson said, that there shouldn't be any upper limit and so on. But I also have a question about why isn't there any temporary modular housing west of Oak Street? Like, is that part of the city completely off limits? And if you support temporary modular housing in all parts of the city, should that also include the other neighborhoods as well? We've done a lot in Grandview, Woodland, and in Strathcona and Mount Pleasant. Next slide. And you can see the sites that have been mentioned, entire city blocks. Next slide. Recently approved site, native housing on Gravely, and there's no analysis in the report. Next slide. The signage is actually posted in the wrong location, so you posted the sign on the opposite corner, and I really would wonder how this happened. I would like to hear an apology from staff. If you look at the signage, next slide. The entire issue of it being temporary modular housing is in the fine print. There has been no open house. Why has the open house not been held? And who's responsible? Next slide. This will allow the Director of Planning to make a decision if you approve this. It's not a rigorous process, and there are so many unanswered questions, like who's the intended operator? Is it a low barrier? What about the mix of residents? Would there be a community advisory panel, a good neighborhood agreement, or something like that? How was the site identified from the thousands that staff said that they looked at? And what are those thousands of sites? Could they share them out? What are there certain parts of the city that are off limits, like west of Oak? And this has potential precedent-setting nature for industrial land elsewhere as well, if you choose to approve this. Next slide. And I'm very concerned that the Property Endowment Fund may be calling the shots. I never voted for them. I voted for you. And if the Property Endowment Fund says, hey, this is the only piece of land that we can give to council in all of Vancouver and take it or leave it, I think it's a very poor place to be. Next slide. And I think there are solutions. This report has to be looked at by a professional outside of the city of Vancouver. You're also the applicant, so there's an inherent conflict. And choose the best sites available on evidence. So those are my comments, and thank you for listening.
Thanks very much for your presentation. We have a question from Councillor Hardwick. Councillor Hardwick, up to 5 minutes, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Bohaus. I share your concern, as I think many councillors do, about the precedent-setting nature of this, especially in light of our shortage of industrial land. Now, I do have to suggest that your interpretation of the Property Endowment Fund sounds like the Star Chamber, which it isn't. But I do take your point that staff did say they'd looked at thousands of sites before settling on this one. And I do take your point that we haven't seen any west of Oak Street. Do you have any specific suggestions in terms of location, or is that a general statement?
If you look at like 7th and Arbutus, beside the Arbutus corridor, and there are lots of sites along the Arbutus corridor where it widens. I'd like to see one in the heart of my neighborhood at Adneck and Commercial on the empty Easy Park lot. So yeah, there are lots of sites, and I think we could even crowdsource this as a city.
Thank you for showing some of the limitations on the site, especially with the traffic and the train and all of that adjacency. I'm hoping that when we do get back to asking further questions of staff, that they'll be prepared to answer some more of the site's limitations. But I'm also curious, ultimately, what triggered you to come and speak to this particular item, if you don't mind saying?
Well, I think that for our homeless, we have a crisis, and I think we need to do better than just warehousing people and putting them in an industrial site that has a lot of silt, has a lot of noise. I think, in terms of our dignity, we deserve better, and we can do better as Vancouverites. And I think in terms of the staff presentation, I read it, and I have never seen, I'm very concerned about the quality of the work. That's my personal thing. So that's what prompted me to come forward, because I think staff should have done the site analysis, and there's a lot of key important information that was left out. So I wanted to make sure that council has a lot of the facts in the background around this site and the considerations that should be taken, put in. and also that you're essentially making the decision that Gil Kelly can approve this behind closed doors at his leisure if you choose to approve this motion.
I just want to clarify quickly before my time is up that your objection to having this in an area that you've identified as being concentrated with other social housing is not because you object to social housing, but rather because you think it should be more distributed. Is that accurate?
Well, I think it should be more distributed, but I think this is a very, very poor site for social housing for a number of, whether it's the fishbowl effect, whether it's liquefaction, whether it's the lack of a sidewalk and the slope issues and accessibility issues. So I think there are a number of reasons that it needs to be looked at again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, and that's it for questions, sir. Well, thanks for coming in today, and we'll move on to our next speaker. Clerks, do we have the next speaker on the phone who I believe, looking at my note here, is Nathan Davidovich.
It is the clerk here, Mayor Stewart, and yes.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Davidovich. You're on for up to 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I mean, I do support helping the homeless and housing them temporarily, until permanent housing is built. And I presume the government of Canada has announced, is it 51 million to the city today? So looks like there's some money coming your way. However, I don't know. I mean, the staff, did they mention transit service on East First Avenue? They must have been looking at the map from the 1950s when there was a bus service on East First Avenue. But we haven't had the bus service since then. And, I mean, the site is about 2 kilometers from the Main Street SkyTrain station, which is a good probably 20, 25 minutes walk for the average person, you know. And there is 3 bus trips on Terminal Avenue in the morning and I think 2 in the afternoon. But, I mean, that's definitely not enough. And the other SkyTrain station, the VCC Clark, is also not that close, and you can't legally walk along the railway right away because that's private land, belongs to the railway. So you can't sort of shortcut along Glen Drive to get to VCC Clark. You have to go along Clark Drive and then back down at 6th Avenue to go there. So it's really very bad. Now, I do have some good news. During the election, I met MLA Melanie Mark, and I just got an email from her. She says the minute the new Minister of Transportation is appointed, she's going to go there and bang to get back the First Avenue bus. So at least we have our MLA for the area interested in helping in transportation. But, you know, the city should also go and bang on TransLink and saying, get some service here. There's so many developments going on, and at First and Clark and First and Commercial and so forth, all the way to Brentwood in Burnaby. And then on the west side, of course, we have the new St. Paul Hospital and other developments. So we need that bus service as soon as possible, not by 2050 or 2030 or 40, what the staff is saying. And if you look at that report that you have for next Tuesday of the climate emergency report, it doesn't even mention the First Avenue bus or any other new bus routes that we need in order to get the mode split that we want more people walking, cycling, and using transit. So, I mean, I'm really baffled at the staff not presenting all the information to council. And I mean, I hope they can build one there fast, but based on what I just heard, I mean, it might be a year or year and a half before they be able to use this site properly and build a proper modular housing. And in the meantime, there's lots of other sites in the city where you can put them in within 6 months on empty parking lots and all kinds of places. Well, so I don't know why are we not doing something within 6 months instead of a year or more that it will take for this site. But, you know, we can get as many modular housing as we can. I mean, New Westminster City Council last night, they proposed that we get school portables to house the homeless. And I agree with them. Why not? You take the school portables and put them in some parking lots, some empty lands, and we can do it within a few months, you know. Yeah. Did I finish my time?
You have, yes. Thanks very much. And there's no... no
thank you. Yeah.
Sir. So I appreciate you calling in. Okay, Council, that's it.
Thank
I
you.
understand for registered speakers. Thanks for calling in, Mr. Davidovich. And I'm going to make the first call for speakers on this item. Anybody who'd like to speak to this item, please call toll-free 1-833-353-8610, participant code 43311 hashtag to get on the list. And clerks, I'm just going to check. Is there anybody else on the line or in the chambers to speak to this item?
No one here and no one on the line for this item, Mayor Stewart.
Okay, thanks so much. And so that's the first call for speakers. I'll make a second call. If there's any speakers who wish to speak to this item, please call 1-833-353-8610, followed by code 43311, hashtag to get on the speakers list. And any other speakers, clerks?
It is the clerk here, Mayor Stewart, and the answer remains the same. No one in the chamber and no one on the line for this item.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to call for the third time, and then we'll take a 5-minute break. Any speakers, 1-833-353-8610, and just remember all the information is also on the live stream. So, Council, we're at 7:17 p.m., so we will come back at 7:23 for debate and decision on this item. So thanks, Council, and we'll see you in 5.
It is the clerk here, Mayor Stewart, and no one further has joined the line for this item, and there is nobody in person at City Hall either.
Okay, great, thanks. So we'll, because there are no speakers left on the list, we're going to close public comments and move to debate and decision. And just wondering if staff have any closing comments.
No, we don't. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. And I'll go back to the question queue. Do any questions? Councillor Hardwick, you have up to 5 minutes for questions to staff. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to go back over some of the things I touched on previously with staff. Since this is coming, and we understand the urgency and appreciate that, but I'd like some kind of assurance that you're going to be looking at the landfill and the stability of the land that this is going to be put on top of to start with. Can you tell me what next steps you'll be doing to look at concerns around liquefaction and the stability of the landfill?
Thank you for the question. We do have Heather Oland on the line tonight from VAHA, who could also jump in here with more information. But through the development permit process, that would be part of the regular review for anything happening in that area. And we know that VAHA has started exploring those kinds of questions to date. They are waiting, of course, to determine whether Council will accept the amendment before proceeding fully on to more of those studies. But the intention is to explore all of those aspects that could come to bear on the viability of landing temporary modular housing at that location.
What happens if you determine that it's not viable as a location and we've already gone through this amendment?
Well, we would reverse it back to the industrial category, which is the intention anyway at the point that the temporary modular housing is removed to a maximum of 10 years. So it would happen inevitably. It may happen sooner if it turns out that the studies don't support the proposed temporary modular housing.
Hello, Council, Mayor and Council. It's Heather from the Heather Oland from the Vancouver Affordable Housing Agency. I just want to provide you with some assurance that we have done a very thorough initial assessment in terms of due diligence before having the site even proceed to come to you this evening for this ODP amendment. Those assessments include very thorough geotechnical investigation, environmental investigations, surveys, arborist investigations, transportation investigations, full servicing investigations with respect to water, sewer, telecom, storm, and those have all been professionally provided and vetted as part of the due diligence we do before we proceed to the next stage, which would be starting to do the design that would support a development permit application. So we've certainly satisfied ourselves that at this stage the site is viable and able to proceed to the next stage of development.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. And the reason I'm asking the question is I have seen other applications for residential activity on land that is similarly challenged. So that's why I'm emphasizing that in particular. One of the speakers showed some images around the transportation and topography limitations on the site. Have you similarly examined those carefully? It was described as a fishbowl. Have you looked at positioning on the site, et cetera? I know until it gets to development permit, you're not there yet, but have you taken those elements into consideration?
Certainly we have. The site is not perfect, and it's very difficult to find a perfect site, and so that's why we need to be smart in our design. And we've absolutely, have opportunities for screening. We have opportunities to move some accesses. We've got, very smart architects working on the project for us, and in consultation with BC Housing as well, and their entire team of development managers. So, we want the project to be successful for the neighborhood and successful for the residents, and we're doing all that we can to mitigate those design concerns through the development permit process.
And one more question, if I may. is it was stated verbally earlier there were thousands of sites that you've looked at. Is there a way that council can see the list of sites that if you, or we can have a sense of it? Because I do take the point of one of the speakers in that there has been a concentration of social housing in this area that might be better distributed around other parts of the city. And, you know, I, for one, would be interested in learning more about that.
Alison Dunnett, Senior Planner, Arts, Culture, and Community Services. At the direction of Council, staff did a significant amount of research into sites. We will confer with our partners in legal services about whether that is information that could become public or PDF, but I think there are limitations on that at this time.
Thanks. We're up to 5 minutes. Thank you. Councillor Carr, up to 5.
Yes, thank you. A few questions. First of all, in terms of the review of sites that you did, I'm assuming that you focused on City of Vancouver-owned sites, at least in large part, but you may have been looking at other sites. But have you been really focused on those City of Vancouver-owned sites in particular?
Alpha Data Senior Planner, we have looked at both city-owned sites. Obviously, that's those are lands where we have considerable control over moving those forward, but we also have reached out to private owners of sites in looking for additional opportunities.
And can you tell me the distribution of city-owned land? Do we have a fairly equitable distribution or not throughout the city?
Alpha, I would defer on that question to maybe our staff.
Yeah, hi, it's
Services.
City Manager here. Alison, can I jump in?
Please.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we don't have an equal distribution, actually. In terms of developable or usable sites, we've really struggled with finding west side sites, which is why we don't have more temporary modular on the west side. Most of the sites that we have gained access to that either in the PEF or owned by the city are on the east side. So we did try pretty hard with developers and others that might have sites that we could utilize on the west side, including the MST at Jericho and other sites that we've tried to gain access to take advantage of a more equitable distribution of temporary modular across the city, and we so far haven't been very successful on the west side.
Right. A couple of more questions. In terms of demand for housing versus demand for industrial use, I wonder if you could, staff, you could just outline for me why it would appear wise for council to look at the demand for housing use over industrial use for the next 10 years on this site.
Hi, I can take the question. It's Yardley McNeil. One thing, we're looking for opportunities, as staff have said today. This property is city-owned, so there's an easy approach to move forward. It is currently vacant and underutilized, and temporary modular housing is just that, temporary. It doesn't require excavation. These buildings can sit on the property. So the intention is not to change the industrial character permanently. It's to allow this temporary use for up to a maximum of 10 years to address the housing crisis. And that has been, as you know, a strong priority for council. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just one final question. We just heard news today that the city is going to be receiving $51.5 million in federal funding for housing. Are we anticipating the need for more sites because of the potential of senior government funding for housing?
I know my housing colleagues here will jump in as well, but that money is welcome and absolutely could be attributed to the needs in the city. And I think it'll be a variety of different housing opportunities, including temporary modular housing.
Okay, thank you so much. Those are my questions, Mr. Mayor. You may be on mute.
Sorry about that. Councillor Kirby-Young, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think I'll need that much time. I'm wondering if staff can comment on who, generally speaking, we anticipate that which 98 persons and souls would be provided homes here? And I anticipate your answer might be that you would look to work with an operator later, and that'll be dependent. But I'm wondering at this stage if you can give us a sense of who these units will be providing shelter for, any specific groups or demographics other than homeless. But are we looking for example, at our Indigenous community that's providing housing for women? Do we have any sense?
Hi there, this is Lisa Jimenez with ACCS. BC Housing is undergoing an operator selection process for this building in particular, and that should be completed soon. And what we can say is that there's always going to be priority for the most local to the site for housing those people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness that are close and living near the site.
Okay, and would that include, thank you, would that include, I know that there's particularly high prevalence of people living in vehicles and RVs around the site. So would they fall into, those people fall into that category, or would it be people that don't even have a car or an RV? Are you able to comment on that?
There will be outreach made to folks that are living in vehicles as well. Often what we have seen is that folks that are living in vehicles are perfectly happy to continue to live in their vehicles. However, the outreach team that goes around and makes connections with people upon approving a TMH development permit would definitely reach out to those folks as well.
Okay, but priority given to people that are in the area, residing in the area now in some form. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Swanson next. Go ahead, Councillor Swanson. Still questions to staff here.
How long will it take to get the modular housing up? Are we still expecting like March?
Hello, it's Heather Oland calling in from Baja. Our expectation is that March was never actually the timeline. We were hoping April. There have been some delays, and now we're hoping to have everything completed in May. In the early spring of 2021.
Okay, thanks. That's it for me.
Thanks, Councillor Dominato. Up to 5.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of last few questions. Could you just clarify how long this has been a city-owned site?
We don't know the exact age of that, but it's been several decades that the city has owned the property.
Several decades, okay. And I think one of the speakers mentioned that there had been greenhouses on it up until recently, and I recall that as well. But in the several decades that we've owned the property, has it been used for any industrial purposes beyond the fact that we've had greenhouses on it?
Prior to Soul Foods occupying the site, that was the nonprofit agricultural provider that had gardens on it. The site was used, I think, for a variety of different purposes. So I would think everything from storage to other light industrial, but we don't have a history of the uses. Whatever they were would have complied with the industrial designation on the property.
Okay. And I guess in light of that last question is and I know we had our recent report about the employment lands review, but has there been recent demand or interest in this property for industrial use beyond those examples? I'm trying to get at sort of demand and supply.
Well, one of the other ways the site was chosen is in concert with the city's real estate division. So we don't understand there to be any other request to use the property, which is why it became one of the properties to be considered for TMH. So we're not anticipating needing to compete with anyone for the property.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think that's it for questions from council. And just go back to my script here. So, Council, I think that's it. Do we have a mover for this recommendation?
Councillor Kirby.
Councillor Boyle seconded.
Great. Councillor Kirby-Young, seconded by Councillor Boyle. And we have Councillor Swanson. You have up to 5 minutes for comments, debate, and decision.
Yeah, I thought Stephen Bull has made some good points about it not being the greatest site. But I think we need it desperately, and people who are living in tents now can't wait more and more years and months to get something. So I'm going to vote for it just because of the speed of it. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Hardwick.
Well, much in the same way as Councillor Swanson, because of the urgency of the situation, I will support it. I remain concerned about the precedent-setting nature of this, as we need to maintain our industrial land. It's scarce. I'm satisfied through my questioning of staff about the site specifics and concerns around the landfill and also proximity to traffic. It's not an ideal site. It's a temporary site, and as long as it's returned to its industrial use as we move forward in addressing our housing demands, then that's why I'll go along with it. Thank you.
Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to provide a couple of closing comments on the record, and I will support the site because we do have a desperate need for housing and to get people off the street and into homes and hopefully move them along the pathway. Having said that, this particular application raised some really important concerns for me. And that one is, and I'll echo it again, as particularly as Council's rep on the Industrial Lands Committee for Metro Vancouver and Regional Planning, is that we do have a real shortage of industrial land and of full and complete and optimal use of that industrial land. And what I'd like to see is more, proactive opportunities to utilize that land. And when I hear sort of a response that we didn't have interest in the site and recognizing it's a city-owned site, that response doesn't cut it for me. I'd like to see us taking initiative as to how we can bring that use back into industrial land and how we can work to really maximize and intensify those uses, because if we don't have those industrial city-serving businesses and they depart to the suburbs, then we have a real issue and a real challenge in the city of Vancouver in terms of providing those necessary services. So that's one thing that I'll flag in terms of not wanting to see a lot of conversion of industrial sites in general and tying them up, even though it is a temporary change to the use and has a maximum period of time. And then the other conversation that I do want to flag, and I think it's a really important one, is about sort of the spirit of building diversified communities. And I think Councillor Swanson commented that we don't, sort of ask in terms of, or limit in terms of, the amount of people of more income or means that can live in a neighborhood, and we don't talk about that. And I would actually counter that and say we talk about that all the time. We talk about diversifying single family into multi-family dwelling. We talk about adding, moving from strata to rental. We talk about looking at rental and making it affordable rental so that folks that are workers with average incomes can afford to live in neighborhoods and stay in somewhere that they live and work, and we can keep that employment base. We talk about more social housing. We often talk about, and it's been referred to, I think, by my fellow councillors many times, much to my chagrin, and I think it was inappropriate, about rich ghettos, for example, around the Cambie corridor. And I also don't want to see us creating concentrations of kettling people similar to what we experience in the downtown east side. I want to see us building diverse, functional, integrated communities across the city where we can have that vibrant mix of people, we can have that dynamic level of interaction, and we can build that diversity in our community. So I think it's a very appropriate conversation to have, to be thoughtful about trying to build integrated communities and not notwithstanding the challenges around specific sites, but one type of housing in specific areas, because I don't think that lends itself to a sort of a multi-dimensional fabric of a city, and to creating interesting neighborhoods and inclusive neighborhoods. So I won't be apologetic for that comment. I think that these are conversations that constructively that we need to have. And we need to kind of check ourselves in terms of that balance between immediacy for homes and the type of communities that we're building towards more of an inclusive model and approach across the city. So those are my comments. I will support it for this reason tonight, but I will be looking very carefully at any future requests on industrial land, and I hope that we can work to take initiative on our own city-owned sites that may fall within industrial designation, because there are some dire needs there, and I think there's also some very real opportunity for us to move forward with some initiatives and projects on those sites. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boyle.
Thanks. I also will be supporting this project enthusiastically because, of course, as we've heard many times, it's badly needed housing for residents who deserve to live in all parts of our city. I also want to add that I am very happy to hear how supportive so many folks are of building this type of social housing in every neighborhood of the city. And I hope that we see support for these projects when they come back to council in real terms in other parts of the city where they are less common and have historically been less likely to be built, even if that includes, especially if that includes looking at how city-owned sites can be more equitably spread across the city to make more land in West Side neighborhoods and lower density neighborhoods available for temporary modular housing and social housing. Again, really appreciate how many people have brought up that it's important that we equitably distribute these projects across the city, and I look forward to seeing that support continue when we're actually approving projects like this elsewhere too. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Yes, thank you, Mr. I do want to thank speakers for coming, and Mr. Boyles in particular for outlining the various shortcomings of this site. I think it's always useful to have all of the facts on the table when you're dealing with a decision. I really want to emphasize that it's not a trade-off in my mind between industrial land use versus land used for social housing, in this case, temporary social housing. In this case, it is a temporary use. It converts back. That gives me confidence because I don't want to see us undermine our industrial land base. But the temporary uses for 10 years maximum. I really want to emphasize how much I love the temporary modular housing, and I'm so appreciative of the partnership that the city has with the provincial government on that housing. The need is truly urgent, and our ability to offer city land is fantastic. Not every municipality has the ability that we do, and I'm just so grateful that we do have that. And I do want to note that that land that we own is not evenly distributed throughout the city. Thank you, Mr. City Manager, for making that point clear. So it's not, but we have the advantage of having land wherever it's distributed and putting that to the urgent need to supply affordable housing. The Director of Planning will, I know, weigh all the considerations in it's his decision in the end. But in my mind, we leave the door open by voting for this to the use of this land, and it is my hope that we actually have an abundance of money from the federal government and the provincial government towards housing, and we would then be well positioned to move forward with this, and even make it gives us more flexibility to say yes to every offer of money and partnership in the development of truly affordable housing.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. If I can cede the chair to you, Councillor Boyle, as Deputy Mayor for this month, I'd just like to make a few comments.
Yes, so go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Council, it does sound like this is going to pass, and thanks so much for your deliberation and support for this. I just want to pass on about how important our modular housing program has been. In the big city mayors meetings, it was when we started really in earnest in March, and even before then, there was a ton of interest from other mayors across Canada, specifically looking to the projects we've had up and moving here, looking at how they've been integrated into communities, and helping folks off the street in a rapid succession. And in fact, if you look at the Rapid Housing Initiative program that was announced today, you'll see specific mentions of both of temporary modular housing, and I can directly say from my knowledge that is attributable to our council and our council's work. So that's thanks to councillors for all the support for this program, but also thanks to staff, because this isn't easy. It's hard to innovate, and I think we're showing that with this work that we're an innovative council, we're a city that cares, and this is just another fine example. So thanks to council and staff for all your work, and it's a great we're showing great national leadership with this kind of effort. So thank you. I take the chair back, Councillor Boyle.
Yes, the chair is back to you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks very much. And I don't see any speakers, councillors left on the list to speak, so I'll call the vote on this. And clerks, if you can put that on the screen, we have unanimous support for this project. Thank you so much. And we're going to item number 5, which is a rezoning on West 49th Avenue. I'm just going to ask if any councillor wishes to declare a conflict of interest, please do so now. And if there's no conflicts, then I'll move on to have the clerk read the application of summary and correspondence.
This is an application by GBL Architects to rezone 203 to 263 West 49th Avenue from RS1 One Family Dwelling District to CD1 Comprehensive Development District to permit the development of a 4-story mixed-use building containing 89 strata-titled residential units with commercial space on the ground floor, a height of 15.9 meters with additional height of 3 meters, for a rooftop amenity space and a floor space ratio of 2.5 are proposed. The General Manager of Planning, Urban Design and Sustainability recommends approval subject to conditions set out in the summary and recommendation of the public hearing agenda, and no correspondence has been received on this application since it was referred to public hearing and prior to the close of the speakers list and receipt of public comments.
Thanks so much. And I'm just looking here. We have no speakers to this item, Council. If there are anybody who would like to speak to this, though, you can call 1-833-353-8610, participant code 43311# to get on the list. We have Alicia Desjardins here from the Rezoning Center. But because we have no speakers, I'm going to ask Council if we'll raise the presentation unless Council would like to see it. Is there anyone like to see this presentation? Okay, thank you very much. And I'll just ask, is the applicant team here to speak to the application?
Mayor and Council, James Todd, JTA Development Consultants.
Great. And did you have a presentation, or are you just content with answer questions?
Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thanks so much. Council, this is your chance to ask questions, the only chance to ask questions to the applicant. And of course, you can ask questions to staff at the same time. So please put yourself on the queue if you'd like to ask questions. I don't see anybody on the queue. So, and let's see now. So we're going to hear from the public, and since we have nobody on the list, I'm just going to make a first call. If there are any speakers of this item who wish to speak to Council, 1-833-353-8610, code 43311# to get on the list. And clerks, do we have anybody in the Council chambers or on the line for this item?
It is the clerk here, Mayor Stewart, and no.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to make my second call. Any speakers? 1-833-353-8610 to speak to this item, participant code 43311# to get on the list. And I'll check with the clerks. Of course, all this information is available on the live stream and on Twitter if you want to contact us. Clerks, anybody?
It is the clerk here, Mayor Stewart, and remains to be no one on the line for this item and no one in the chamber for this item.
Great, thanks so much. I'm going to call the third time for speakers, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break just to give people the chance. 1-833-353-8610, participant code 43311, hashtag to get on the list. And Council, it is 7:54, so we'll come back at 8:01 to make a debate and decision on this item. Okay, thanks, Council. We'll see you in 5 minutes. called in, clerks, or anybody in the chambers?
It is the clerk here, Mayor Stewart. There is no one in the chamber, and I just got a message, no one on the line for this item.
Great. So if we've had no public comments received after 5 p.m. today, we're going to close the receipt of public comments and move on to hearing, making the final decision. Does the applicant have any closing comments on this project?
No closing comments. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Staff, any closing comments?
No closing comments, Your Honor.
Thanks very much. Councillor Hardwick, looks like you have a question to staff. Please.
I do have a question to staff. So I'm just looking at this. I'm seeing a 89 units and a $1.3 million CACs. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
What is the value of one of the condos in this building?
Staff currently don't ask for the value of individual condo units. It will be determined through market prices when the building's constructed in several years' time.
Well, I suspect it may. That certainly one of the two bedrooms would be in the order of $1 million plus. How was this CAC amount determined?
In this area of the Canby corridor, CACs are a flat rate based on a per square foot basis of the residential and commercial floor area.
So what is that, 20 per square foot?
It's about $20 per square foot, I believe.
Ouch. Okay. And so this is what you consider standard then, according to your regulation.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Is that it, Councillor Hardwick?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you. I don't see any other questions from councillors, so we're going to move now to, can I have somebody move the recommendation, please?
So moved, Councillor Carr.
Thank you. Seconder?
Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. And if there's any debate, I'm going to put you on the, main queue. It looks like Councillor Swanson, you perhaps had something you'd like to say. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to vote for this. The whole Canby corridor is more or less an upper income ghetto, and I just don't really think we should be doing that. That's all.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Swanson. I don't see anybody else on the queue to speak to this, so I'm going to call the vote. Council, clerks, if you could cue the vote. Thanks very much. Councillor Dominato. Councillor Dominato. There we go. Clerks, could you pull up the vote on the screen, please? And Council, that passes with Councillor Swanson and Councillor Hardwick in opposition. Thanks very much to the participants and staff. Council, we're going to move on to the next item. Item number 6 on the agenda. It's a rezoning on 24 East Broadway and 2520 Ontario Street. Council, if anybody wishes to declare a conflict of interest on this item, please do so now. Otherwise, we're going to move on and have the clerk read the application and the summary of correspondence received. Go ahead, clerks.
This is an application by Formosus Architecture to rezone 24 East Broadway and 2520 Ontario Street from C3A Commercial District to CD1 Comprehensive Development District to permit the development of a 12-story commercial office building with ground floor retail. A height of 45.1 meters and a floor space ratio of 7.5 are proposed. The General Manager of Planning, Urban Design and Sustainability recommends approval subject to conditions set out in the summary and recommendation of the public hearing agenda. The following correspondence has been received since referral to public hearing and prior to the close of the speakers list and receipt of public comments. 12 pieces of correspondence in support, 9 pieces of correspondence in opposition, and 1 piece of correspondence dealing with other aspects of the application, and this represents correspondence received up to 3:30 p.m. today.
Thank you so much. Council, we do have speakers to this item. So I think it's we should see the presentation. Sorry, I'm just pulling up my script here. So we have Tin Fan from the Rezoning Center with the presentation for staff. From staff.
Point of information or point of procedure, Mr. Mayor. Do we have the ability to waive the presentation if council so chooses?
We can. I just usually do it. So you could, if we probably have a motion on that. So if you wanted to raise a motion to waive the presentation, please feel free.
I move to waive.
Okay. Do we have a seconder on that?
Second.
Yep. Thanks, Councillor Carr. And we're going to do yeas and nays. And if we don't get a unanimous, if somebody says nay, then I'll go to a recorded vote. All those in favor of waiving the presentation say yay.
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 Opposed say nay.
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 Okay, so I'm going to call a recorded vote on this, council. Clerks, if you can trigger that. So, council, if you want to waive the presentation, vote in the affirmative. If you want to see the presentation, vote in the negative. Okay, Councillor Dominato. Councillor Dominato? Check your clerks. Do we have Councillor Dominato?
Mayor Stewart, this is the clerk here. I do see Councillor Dominato on the line. But I can have IT check to see if she needs assistance.
That would be great. Council, so we're just going to have a quick pause here while we try to make sure that Councillor Dominato has access to her voting screen, as is our practice here.
Point of parliamentary procedure.
We are in the middle of a vote, but yeah, sure. Go ahead, Councillor Weep.
I was under the impression that if any councillor would like to see a presentation, we were to see the presentation to ensure that we had the right information to vote at a public hearing.
Yeah, by practice, that's what I do, but if it's a formal vote, then it's just a majority that decides that.
I'm sorry, echoing that, this is not standard to what we've been doing when councillors have expressed a desire to see a presentation.
That's right, but a formal vote decides it, and that's why I called a formal vote. So we're still in the middle of it, waiting to hear from Councillor Dominato. But that's the process. It's
some of the time.
Nope, it's exactly. I do it the same way every time.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I had to step away for a moment. I am here, but I am in support of seeing the presentation.
Okay.
If that's the question.
Yep. So if you want to vote assist, that would be you'd be voting opposed to this option. So would you like a vote assist in that way?
Nope. I'm fine. I can vote. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Oh, you have to click it again, Councillor. There we go. Okay, clerk. So if you could pull this up, this has failed, and so the presentation wasn't waived, and we're going to with Councillor Dominato, Boyle, Weeb, Hardwick, Fry, Dejanova, Carr, and myself in opposition. Okay, so we're going to move now to see the presentation from staff. And staff, whenever you're ready. Okay, I see it up on the public screen. I don't see it yet on the WebEx, though. Maybe clerks could help sort that out.
Mayor, we've accidentally disconnected. If you'll give us just a couple of minutes, we're dialing back in.
No problem.
Hello?
Hello, it's the mayor here.
Hi, sorry about that. This is Teen Fan from Rezoning. We were accidentally disconnected. Can you hear me?
That's okay. We can hear you. We can see your presentation on the public screen, but we can't see it on the WebEx, so I'm just hoping our clerks can help you get that loaded up for council. There we go. Starting to see it now.
Great.
Great.
Sorry about that.
No problem at all. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you. Good evening. My name is Teen Fan, rezoning planner for this application. Okay. The site is located at Broadway and Ontario Street. The existing zoning is C3A, which permits a variety of uses, including commercial, institutional, and some compatible residential. The site area is 16,000 square feet with a frontage along Broadway. There's a slope of 14 feet and it rises up as you head towards the lane. Underground parking is accessed from Ontario Street and above-grade parking is from the rear lane. Sites east and west along Broadway are also zoned C3A. The site's very well serviced by the 99B line, and there's a future SkyTrain station plan for the next block over. Running adjacent and shown in green dashes are two very well-used cycling routes, Ontario Street Greenway and 10th Avenue Bikeway. North of Broadway is the I-1 industrial zone, and it's primarily occupied by low and mid-rise commercial and light industrial buildings. South of the site, we have RT6 and RM4, and that permits medium-density residential and a number of other conditional uses, including retail, service, culture, and recreation. Looking south from the proposal, buildings in the area have varied heights with a mix of uses and a range of ages. This segment of Mount Pleasant is made up of many older buildings that form a unique cluster of character and heritage homes. For example, there are some 10 registered heritage homes located just behind the site. Also nearby is a 1960s federal building, 10-story apartments, churches, and daycares. We also have strata condos that were built in the last decade and a half. There are two buildings on site. 24 East Broadway contains 6 rental units, and it was constructed in 1906. Given the stucco cladding and a large addition to the rear, these significant renovations have altered the building's historic value. As a result, retention is not being sought. The 1959 3-story building next door contains retail, service, and institutional uses, also not proposed for retention. The enabling policy is the MetroCore Jobs and Economy Plan. Through this, the Central Broadway study area, shown in black, was identified as the second largest job center after the downtown core. The plan also recognized a shortfall in commercial space and the importance of this area for enhanced commercial capacity next to rapid transit. Further, the Broadway plan sets out draft principles specifically to reaffirm the importance of job space, to enhance Broadway as a great street, and to foster a robust and diverse economy. The Broadway interim rezoning policy allows proposals that have received a positive response to proceed during the Broadway planning work. This rezoning is one of them. This proposal is for one 12-story commercial office building at 148 feet with an 8-story podium. The application consists of 125,000 square feet of new office, including 20,000 square feet of retail, all over 7 levels of underground parking. A public bike share is also being provided on the site. The total FSR is 7.75. The building height at 148 feet would respect the Queen Elizabeth view cone, preserving public views of the North Shore Mountains from Queen Elizabeth Park. Office is located on levels 3 to 12, with outdoor amenity areas included. Retail is spread out over 3 levels, with some below-grade retail to maximize employment space. The building form and design received positive support from the urban design panel. At Ontario Street, the building is pulled back so pedestrians headed north would still have a view of the North Shore Mountains. Design conditions have also been included to reduce the perceived height of the building by deleting appurtenances to soften its visual impact. Retail stretches along Broadway with a cafe that wraps around the corner. The widened sidewalks allow for new street trees and seating for local shops towards a more animated streetscape. Landscaping is provided over 4 levels with 2 green roofs for outdoor amenity space. The cafe is connected to a covered plaza with outdoor seating, and the bike share is connected to citywide cycling network. 7 levels of parking is proposed to include some 80 bicycle spaces. All parking and loading will be moved to the lane. The 1906 building contains 6 tenanted rental units. They currently rent for approximately $1,380 for a studio to $1,750 for a 1-bedroom per month. Rental replacement is required for specific zones that are identified under the rental housing stock official development plan. Since the C3A zone is outside of the zones listed in the ODP, redevelopment of this C3A site is not subject to rental replacement. However, the owner is still required to provide tenant relocation support for eligible tenants under the Tenant Relocation and Protection Policy. Eligible tenants will receive assistance finding new housing, free rent, and moving expenses. This application was submitted 4 days after COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. In-person open houses were paused to respect physical distancing and public gathering restrictions. The city was one of the first in Metro Vancouver to launch a digital platform. A virtual open house enabled projects to move forward, allowing the process for public discussion and obtaining feedback to be maintained during COVID. Shape Your City is a 3-week open house, and it replaces the 3-hour in-person open house that happened prior to COVID. Individuals had access to a 3D model, a virtual 3D model, in lieu of a physical model, with drawings and other materials available online. Comments were sent directly to the staff team, and questions were posted publicly on the website, and staff responded publicly within 24 hours. Since June, Shape Your City has hosted some 25 virtual open houses with approximately 11,000 visits to the online platform. For over 3 weeks, we saw 285 unique visitors to the virtual open house page and received 87 submissions. Of the 45% of the visitors who chose to submit a response, 27% opposed the project, 17% supported, and 1% were mixed. The community expressed support for job space close to transit, building height and massing, and architectural design. Regarding concerns, we heard that the building height exceeded heights in the area. At 148 feet, the building aligns with directions under the MetroCore and Broadway plan that permit buildings to reach the underside of the view cone. Second, the public felt that a glass building was incompatible with nearby brick and wood buildings. Staff have applied a design condition for adding materials and further developing the architectural design to better resemble the historic fabric of Mount Pleasant. Concerns were expressed that 230 vehicle spaces was far too high given the proximity to transit, and that this would create safety issues. The 230 spaces is below the bylaw maximum, which is 281. Regarding safety, the 2 points of entry for vehicles that currently exist would be reduced to 1, where parking and loading would be moved to the lane. This is expected to improve the in and out traffic that is now off of Ontario. The city is also improving the 2 bicycle routes with enhanced safety measures. Finally, respondents questioned whether office space was still needed given that the pandemic saw more people work from home. Long-term forecasting still tells us that office space is still needed despite a short-term work-from-home trend, especially as the city continues to lead the region as a key employment center. Further, the smaller office floor plate size of 10,000 square feet is well suited for smaller local tenants. This rezoning would contribute almost $3.5 million in public benefits allocated towards childcare, affordable housing, public art, and other infrastructure upgrades, for example. This project would generate 520 construction jobs and Class A office space for 400 office staff, plus an additional 50 for the retail component, contributing to the city's Restart Smart initiative. This application advances the MetroCore Jobs and Economy Plan for employment space next to transit. Staff and the applicant team are available for questions. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thanks for the presentation. And just 1 second, please. Okay, is the applicant team here to speak to the application?
Yes, good evening, Mr. and members of council. Tom Bunting from Moses Architecture is present. I could give a short extension to the planner's presentation, which I think was very thorough.
If you'd like to, that's up to you. You can present something to us or just answer questions. If you'd like to present, did you have a presentation, or would it just be verbal?
A very short presentation. Planner has just a couple of slides showing the building in the context of the neighborhood.
Okay. Happy to see that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions to do with the building and views and sunshine, blocking sun. The building is directly north of all the residential areas to the south. So it effectively does not block any sun. It can't. It's from 9 o'clock in the morning to 6 at night all year round. The next slide shows the sort of area.
What is the privilege, Mr. Mayor? I'm not seeing slides on the WebEx or the public screen. I don't know if others are.
They are on the WebEx, but you're right. I don't see them on the public screen. Clerk, have we got a? There may just be a delay, but.
Mayor Stewart, it is the clerk here. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, I can.
We're looking to see if they were sent in to us, but yes, we just found them. Oh. So we'll just get them up on the stream. It'll be just a moment.
And maybe if whoever's controlling the WebEx slide, if you want to go back to the first slide, just so we can sync them up. There we go. Okay, so they're both up. Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you.
Go ahead, the applicant team, please go ahead.
Okay, let me just back up and quickly start again. This is the elevation on Broadway, looking south at the building. It sort of rationalizes how the building was designed to address the corner and to address the various heights of buildings within the broader context of the neighborhood. Next slide. Again, just a graphic showing newer buildings that will be larger as SkyTrain and the area develops under the Core Metro Jobs policy. Next slide. And then just quickly, this is the residential area to the south. Full slide, you can see from the location of the slide on the left is 10th block up at 10th Avenue, and then it goes up one more block from 11th, and then it goes off to the side to the east and the west to show the context. The context of the neighborhood to the south, residential neighborhood, is moving up quite rapidly in elevation, and various mix of buildings and natural landscape more or less fit into the context. There's a few other slides that we can hold on question period that we can articulate further with any questions or concerns.
Great. Thank you so much. I notice that there are questions from council. And Council, just a reminder that this is your only opportunity to ask questions to the applicant, and of course you can ask questions to staff in this round and the round following the when we hear from the public. Councillor Swanson, up to 5 minutes.
That's a holdover.
Okay, Councillor Boyle.
Thanks, Mayor. I was just wanting to ask the applicant if there was any update on the tenant relocation efforts that have gone underway, if those tenants have successfully found a new accommodation yet through the policy.
Over to the applicant.
There's a member of the here tonight. Alexis, could you address that?
Hi, Alexis. Hello?
Hi, please go ahead.
Hi, Alexis Tomashinsky speaking. As far as I understand, the notice has not been given to the tenants to terminate leases, and that won't be done until all of our permits are in place, which will take, my understanding, like several months or years. So tenant relocation hasn't been required as of yet.
Councillor Boyle.
Okay, that is all of my questions on this.
Thank you. Councillor Hardwick, up to 5 minutes.
Great, thank you very much. I have a couple of different lines of inquiry. On this, we're referring to the Metro Core Jobs and Economy Land Use Plan to rationalize the extra requested height and density. I'm curious how this superseded the Mount Pleasant Community Plan and how you've reconciled the two.
Maybe staff.
Hi there, this is Teen Fan from Rezoning. Certainly, oftentimes we have area plans, and we try to align rezoning applications to those area plans, but then there's oftentimes where council years later does adopt new policy, which does supersede this. So that forms the enabling policy of which we evaluate applications under, and that would be the Metro Core Jobs and Economy Plan through this.
Are you not concerned that sends a message to people working on community plans that they will be superseded by regional plans? I'm asking the question very specifically here. I understand that there were several sites under that Mount Pleasant Community Plan. There were 3 sites for greater height and density, but this was not one of them. Was that taken into consideration?
Hi, this is Teen Fan here from Rezoning. Councillor Hardwick, I'm not sure which other 3 sites were that you're referring to.
Well, they're in the Mount Pleasant Community Plan, which was superseded by the Metro Core Jobs and Economy Land Community Plan. Okay, I'll shift my line of inquiry. It was stated that the one area of concern was the office capacity, and one of the questions was whether within the context of the pandemic and COVID, whether there was going to be this kind of demand for office intensification in the future going forward. And I heard the rationale that there's an expectation that in the future things will get back to normal. But what if it doesn't? Are there alternative plans for this office space should the demand not present itself?
And is that to the applicant or to the staff?
Well, I could ask the applicant, since they're the ones that would have to deal with that. It's
okay.
Less of a...
to the applicant team?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
I could start off, Tom Bunting from OSIS. The studies that we've been following for the last 8 to 9 months are starting to come out on the effects of the pandemic. And there's quite a few that have now surveyed a lot of people who have gone home and worked at home, and offices that have enabled this, and it has worked fairly well. I mean, we're one of them. We've done that. And people have sort of started by cobbling together, working between the two areas and being at home and being in the office, and that has been working. But there is a broader studies that are coming forward that are saying that most people see this as a temporary measure and don't like the isolation, want to get back and work with their teams, be mentored by various people within their groups. There's a whole raft of reasons. There's a whole bunch of newer studies coming out, and it gets down to about, what I'm looking at is about maybe 10 to 15% actually likes to work at home. So,
we're both reading the studies. My question is, what if? Have you got a plan B if you don't see the demand presenting itself expeditiously?
I can leave that partly to the developer, but from what I've heard amongst other office developers is they don't see that happening. They see that there'll be quite a different need for it, that maybe some people will be commuting back and forth between home and the office, but the amount of space that they will need will still be there. There was a real trend for people to have less space and people to get packed in more. I think the trend is now away from that. Certain tech companies have certainly started that before the pandemic happened, with adding more space, more social space, more interactive space, more creative space for people. An office building is pretty much a somewhat blank slate if you think about it from a very future-proofing use. It has a very high-end mechanical electrical system that could accommodate many other uses, could accommodate residential. It's an open office. It doesn't have a dividing shear wall system like a residential building does. So there is, and I can only be anecdotal because we have sort of designed office buildings for the last 25 years, but there are incidences where this has happened around the world, and office buildings such as it's called the Cube now along Georgia Street was an office building, and it was the West Coast Transmission Building.
Yes, I know it.
A really kind of cool structural system, and it is now residential.
Thanks. We're
great.
Thank over
you.
Time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Dejanova, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart, and my apologies. I'm struggling a bit with my voice here. So I have a question for the applicant. I know this is the only time I can ask it. Yeah. On page 16 of the report, it had talked about $757,000, well, $343 added to that to be allocated towards childcare facilities and affordable housing. So, and I'll ask staff more about the Metro Core and exactly how wide that area is cast from this specific project later. But my question is was there ever any consideration, from the applicant to add childcare to this facility?
Thanks. Over to the applicant.
To the office space, or to complement, or as part of that space.
Okay, thanks. Applicant? Team?
Yes, this was looked at during the early letter of inquiry phase of rezoning, and the site's a very small site, relatively tight. The depth of sites along Broadway on both sides are where the city grid is angling, and they're not very deep. So there was not enough room to get. We did look at getting the smallest kind of daycare we could on that lower roof, but it was not adequate to fit the requirements of the daycare.
Okay. The fact that money would be going towards that, I'll be asking our staff about that later, and I'm happy to hear that at least it's earmarked for that and or affordable housing. So I'll ask that question later, but thank you for answering my question.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. Councillor Wiebe.
Yeah, as someone that was involved in the Mount Pleasant Community Plan, the components that we're hearing in this report, I guess this is to the proponent, is neighborhood character, and what elements you're going to include in the building. And the other one is on the public realm. And in the report, it talks about the western side having stairs that make it generally pretty difficult for accessibility. So I'm wondering how you're going to tackle the opportunity to reduce the apparent height that's talked about in the document, and how you're going to ensure accessibility on the western edge.
Yeah. At the ground plane, it's one of the comments. It's one of the comments on the rezoning that we are. It's quite a steep grade along Ontario, and we're looking at actively right now at lowering the ground floor so that we can get down to the corner without stairs, and maybe recess a bit into and underneath where the building overhangs so we can come out to grade. The height of the building, like, are you talking about the relative height of the building or the character of the building?
Well, in the staff report, it says that there's different ways that the apparent height is going to be reduced, as well as adding neighborhood context. And so I'm just wondering what those two mean to you, and what have you talked to in regards to both of those?
On the south side of the building, there's a low-rise portion of the building that recesses the windows back deeper from the floor and the roof slab per floor. That would push the windows back and reduce overview from the building, the proposed building, to the surrounding neighborhood. And it breaks up the apparent size of the building. So the building is broken into three components. The ones from the south side, which is really what we're talking about on a lane, is where that low-rise piece actually sort of runs along half of the glass pieces of the two boxes that break up the area, break up the mass of the building. So those are sort of bigger scale form of development issues that we're going to push a bit more. We talked about having sunshades along the back side of the building. The sunshades do help screen some of the solar gain on the building. They also help the sort of modification of the hot and cold within the building. It's not really a big gain to the building, but I think it's a gain to the screening, again, of deflecting views from sort of diagonal views, looking down at neighbors and neighbors looking up at the building. I mean, you really can't move the building back to be obscured from the residences behind. And I think, was there a comment to do with the historical nature of the neighborhood or something?
Well, I think part of the neighborhood context that staff had brought up was the smaller storefronts, recognizing that the current look at the building feels like it's for a larger retail. So I'm wondering, have you looking at the neighborhood context and having smaller retail, recognizing that's kind of what we see in the neighborhood?
We have it right now, because again, sloping streets, you have to step slabs for retail units. So right now there's a potential for 3 direct units off of Broadway. It's not a terribly long street, as you can see, like a long frontage on the street. We're looking at the availability to break that up further. And that's typically what we would do on a street like Broadway, have the ability to do that. We don't know exactly how it's going to work. It's a speculative building. We don't know who the tenants are. We've also put in extra second floor sort of mezzanine space for tenants. The way the plan works, going up the low-rise piece, there is the ability to double load offices, sort of like dentist office, physiotherapist offices, these smaller offices. So it's very good for small local businesses. And they're really just the top piece. But and again, these are very small floor plates. These are 7,000, these are residential sized floor plates for an office building. They are not the big floor plates of the downtown buildings that want to be 20,000 plus square feet for big tenants. This is for smaller tenants.
We're just at the 5 minutes, so I'll have to move on to Councillor Carr. Councillor Carr, up to 5 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you so much. Actually, to the applicant, I think you just started answering a question that was exactly along the lines of the question I have. I was intrigued by your comment about the potential flexibility of converting to residential use should it be that the work space use does change dramatically from what we saw pre-COVID to being more work at home. So I've heard that it's difficult to convert, but explain to me whether it's the size or in terms of the actual plumbing and wiring you're putting in, but what would make your building able to be more flexible in the case that more people do continue to work at home and you may want to in the future, or that someone may want to in the future, convert this building to residential use?
I mean, I will say that it doesn't happen very often. I can't point to a lot of examples like the West Coast Transmission Building switching to residential. But I guess what my point I was making was more, it's very difficult to take a residential building and make it into an office building. Because they're not big enough. There's too many dividing walls. It's not open. You want an open free flow of air, of ventilation in an office building. So you want it open. And what that does is it sort of sets the prerequisite for the ability to switch it to a residential building after. Office building floor to floors and floor to ceilings are much higher, or several feet higher than a residential building, because they are typically larger open spaces. So that inherently gives flexibility to reuse as, I mean, it could be artist studios, it could be a whole bunch of things. The mechanical system, I mean, putting it in very broad terms, is much more powerful than a residential building, and in some sense very different. Now you have to add more plumbing, you have to add all those things, but you know that's just a matter of cost and planning. You can do that. It's an interesting concept to do that. I mean,
I'm just thinking, you know, none of us can predict the future. So somehow flexibility seems to be the order of the day in terms of what might be the smartest move. And 700 square feet floor plates, the smaller office units, would still be using shared washrooms down the hall. Is that the case?
No, I think washrooms would be added. Like if you were going, like as a complete.
You know, your plans for your building, yeah.
Oh no, washrooms are in a location, single location. They're not.
Right.
And it's not a big enough building to spread washrooms around.
Right.
The building. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. And that's it for this round of questioning. We're going to move on to hearing from the public, Council. And just going to look at my list here. Okay, so clerks, I have Danielle Meckler as Danielle Meckler on the line.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hi there. Yes, I can. You have up to 5 minutes.
Hi.
Please go ahead.
Great. Good evening, Mayor Stewart and members of Council. My name is Danielle Melchior, and I've lived in the Elements building on Ontario Street, located across from the site, for 15 years. I'm opposed to the rezoning application. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I appreciate the challenge of running city business during this pandemic. However, it's also been very challenging trying to engage in this process as well. The September 10th referral report from staff to Council was quite helpful in filling in some of the data gaps. I was made aware of the proposed rezoning when the sign went up across the street and I received a mail notification. I was unaware that there was a pre-application community consultation in February, and I would have been very interested in meeting in person with the project proponent. For context, the city hosted a very helpful open house on the Ontario Street Greenway on March 4th. City staff were available to discuss the proposed enhancements and routing and were interested in hearing the concerns of the neighbors. I was not party to any discussion that day about this pending application for rezoning at the corner. As I communicated at that session, in my April submission and with this presentation today, my primary concern is safety and the potential for increased traffic interactions and conflict between cars, pedestrians, and bicycles, given the addition of 230 parking stalls. The route is already very congested. As I understand, it is the busiest north-south bike route in the city, and it intersects with one of the busiest east-west routes half a block away. With traffic calming measures in place on surrounding Quebec and Manitoba streets, the laneways between Broadway and 10th are busy with garbage trucks and vehicles navigating the neighborhood. In addition to the heavy bicycle, e-bike, and e-scooter traffic, this stretch of Ontario seems to be the preferred route for fire trucks heading south back to Fire Hall number 12 on Quebec and 12th. The 10th Avenue Community Church hosts outreach dinners on Mondays and lunch on Tuesday with active pedestrian traffic, and they also run the We Care daycare, and it's very busy with drop-offs and pickups. The recycling depot is located off Ontario 2 blocks north, so bottle collectors are frequently doing their thing along this route. What I can tell you anecdotally is that there is a lot of screeching of brakes, sometimes with metal crunching and yelling from cyclists. You may have collision incident data, but the statistics don't tell the full story on the near misses between vehicles and cyclists on this hill. Improving safety along the Ontario Greenway was a primary benefit contemplated in the plan that went out for consultation. Nothing that I saw at that open house in March contemplated improvements in this block. I'm baffled by the inconsistency of trying to increase bicycle safety and participation and reduce volume on cross streets in the neighborhood with the idea of rezoning an already congested corner and adding 230 parking stalls. Although Appendix B of the referral report includes conditions for public bike share station and a transportation assessment and management study and vague street improvements for protected bike lanes, I'm concerned that this block will remain a bottleneck and become even more congested with increased conflict. My second concern is shadowing. The Elements building lies on the west side of the proposed site. Those living on the east side of the building will lose all morning light exposure. A 30-foot building that covers half the lot will be replaced by a 148-foot building that covers the entire lot. I am concerned that this shadowing effect may further impact safety and visibility on Ontario Street. The final concern that I'd like to raise with you tonight is the inconsistency with the character of the neighborhood, heritage homes and trees, and proposed Ontario Greenway. Requiring the addition of sandstone finishes or bricks that are consistent with the Heritage Hall on Main Street doesn't take away from the fact that overall this will be an imposing glass office structure introduced into a heritage and low-density neighborhood with small local businesses. The area is full of trees and nesting birds, and clearly there will be a risk of increased bird strikes and fatalities. It just doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't fit. The review process has been challenging in its virtual format and pace, and it's been difficult to convey my concerns in an impactful way. I would far prefer to be appearing in person this evening. Given the social distancing measures and timing, it's also been difficult to communicate and engage with neighbors. But I'm most disappointed to be speaking to you over the phone to discuss this rezoning application that feels like it's a done deal. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you, and I urge you to consider whether the concerns raised by me and many others have been addressed, and I urge you to not approve this rezoning application. This approval decision will set a precedent and seems premature prior to Council's consideration of the draft Broadway plan scheduled for 2021. I'd like to thank you for your attention this evening, and that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I have questions from Councillor Hardwick.
Yes, thank you very much for speaking with us today. You commented that you didn't feel that your comments had been heard, and the many others. What many others?
Well, there are 78 residents in this building, and I've seen the submissions from 4 or 5 of my neighbors, and those comments were also reflected. I mean, the concerns, Tien mentioned the concerns and sort of about the height and the out of character business and all of that in his presentation.
Were you part of the Mount Pleasant community planning process? Did you contribute at all?
No, I don't know when it happened. I wasn't aware that it was underway.
It was some time back, but I'm just curious the extent to which people were involved. Well, that's really what I wanted to know from you is you know, we've heard from staff how they feel that the new online process has been successful, and so it's important, I think, to be receiving feedback from residents. You know, hopefully we hear some more positive feedback about this process that we have to be. I mean, obviously the pandemic is deepening. We're in a second wave, so it is what it is. Anyhow, I just want to say thank you again for making the effort. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that's it for questions. Thank you for participating this evening. Is speaker number 2 on the line, clerks? We have, just look here, we have Greg Patterson listed.
It is the clerk here, Mayor Stewart, and I understand Greg Patterson has not joined the line.
Okay, and we've sent an email and a reminder on this meeting?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks very much. We have Chloe Dirksen listed as the 3rd speaker.
And same answer, Mayor Stewart.
Okay, thanks. Then the 4th speaker who's registered is Krista Magnuson.
It is the clerk here, and I understand Krista Magnuson is on the line.
Great, thanks very much.
Hello, this is Krista Magnuson. Just confirming you can hear me?
Yes, I can, and please go ahead. You have up to 5 minutes.
Okay. I also live in the Elements building that is directly to the west across Ontario Street to the proposed development, and have 3 major concerns with this development. The first of which is the shadows that the 12-story building will create. The Elements building, again, directly across Ontario Street to the west of the proposed development, was labeled as retail in the applicant's presentation today. However, it's actually a combination of 1-floor retail, on top of which we have a green north-facing roof garden with 4 floors of residential surrounding that garden. This roof area includes a shared garden for all residents and multiple yards that are assigned to specific units. In Appendix D of the referral report, it illustrates long shadows on public areas in both the spring and fall. If that diagram were to show the shadows earlier in the morning when they are going fully west, it would illustrate full shade for the majority of the rooftop garden. This shadow would get even longer in the middle of winter when, unfortunately, due to the path of the sun, that is often the only time our garden gets direct sunlight. Our rooftop garden has 11 trees, multiple large hydrangeas, and hedges in the private and shared yards. I would ask Council to consider the impact of the loss of that much sunlight would have on this garden, which, being north-facing already, has limited sunlight, as well as the impact on the owners. For example, compared to a unit in this building with a balcony, I paid $30,000 more for my unit because it had a yard. My yard with 3 trees, a grassy area, a large patio where I now have multiple roses, some herbs I am attempting to grow, some other plants, as well as seating areas. A yard where I have morning coffee in the sunshine and an attempt to grow those herbs. If my yard were to lose that rare morning sun that we get in the winter, as well as the morning sun for spring and fall, that would significantly affect not only the enjoyment of the garden, but the building's maintenance of it, the increased cost of replacing plants that don't live as long with the lack of light. You know, if we have to replace the trees, that is involving a crane and closing a lane on Broadway to replace one of the trees in our garden. And the other issue is, of course, the value of the units. Who wants to pay extra for a garden that gets very little sunlight 3/4 of the year? My second issue with this, or concern, with this development is the design and height of the building not fitting the neighborhood, which has already been discussed heavily tonight. I fully agree that this area of Broadway could use a facelift and needs to be updated, but a 12-story glass building surrounded by 2 to 4-story brick and wood buildings will only stand out for all the wrong reasons. It's not the Mount Pleasant vibe that people like myself moved to this neighborhood for. The 10-story building mentioned nearby is the only building over 4 to 6 stories anywhere nearby. The majority are actually houses or 2 to 4 story apartments. And I think this building would be great in other areas of Vancouver, but not in Mount Pleasant, where the Mural Festival, one of which of those murals is on one of the buildings that is going to be developed, is an example of our neighborhood culture. I should also mention that the shared bike site that was mentioned as a benefit of this development would be duplicating a shared bike site that already exists half a block away on 10th Street in Ontario. My third concern, which is a serious one as well, is traffic and safety. I understand the large parkade is part of the building and that the attractive visualizations in the model photos and display boards show lots of cars and pedestrians coexisting happily, but they do not include the large number of cyclists on the Ontario Street Bike Corridor. And I would be extremely concerned about adding more traffic to the northern corner of Broadway in Ontario, which is already congested with the heavy bike traffic and the current residential traffic. Due to the one-way streets in the area, the most common way to get into my building, as well as the residential streets to the south of Broadway, is to go north on Ontario Street. When either turning north onto Ontario or pulling out of the laneway onto Ontario, as people from this development would be doing, residents who are used to this area and live here, we know to be careful of the bikes headed south, sometimes going right down the middle of the road, sometimes very quickly, taking advantage of the hill. But we know to be careful of the bunches of cyclists that are often gathered on Ontario, waiting for the Broadway light to change. It's a narrow street, and we all work together to keep the area safe, but adding 12 floors of office and retail space is going to create a very dangerous situation. And I fully support developing this area, but not with this height or density. I realize that a lot of what I've said has already been said this evening, but given the importance and the potential impact of this building on my daily life and the safety, I really appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And we do have questions for you. First from Councillor Carr. Councillor Carr, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us. I am looking at that appendix that you had referenced and the shadowing. And so I'm not quite seeing in these shadow studies what you were talking about. It looks more like all the shadows are heading north. But describe again to me. You are across the street to the. Did you say to the west?
To the west, yes. So if you're looking on Appendix D, if you look at, say, page 6 of Appendix D.
That's where I'm at. Yep.
The top right corner, September, March 21st, 10 a.m., where there's that long shadow. If that was, say, at 8 a.m., that shadow would be further to the west, going right over top of my building.
Okay. Now I see which one you're looking at. Okay, that's great. I just, I'll ask staff more about that. But thank you very much for that detail.
Of course.
Thank you. Councillor Hardwick, up to 5.
Yes, thank you very much for speaking with us tonight. My question, I guess, is really about your expectations. I'm sure you've been hearing about the Broadway plan for some time, and the plans both for the subway and for intensification along Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of all of that?
I'm not aware of all the details. I moved into the area about 2.5 years ago. And so I don't know all of the details. I have been looking into the Broadway plan, especially with learning about this building, which I actually only learned about a week ago when I got the letter in the mail for the notice of this hearing. I fully understand that this area will be going through a major change, but I hope that the changes that happen will still be cohesive with the buildings that already exist here.
Yeah, I don't know if you there. I certainly would expect that we'll see more height and density along Broadway going forward. I was kind of relieved. Did you note that the view cones are being respected? I noticed that in the design.
Mm-hmm. And view cones are certainly important, but to me, a view cone would be seen as kind of a minimum barrier. You never want to lose a view cone, but that doesn't mean that everything that is allowed in a view cone should be built.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Of course. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, and that is it for questions. So really appreciate you phoning in this evening to participate. I'm just going to, now that we've gone through the registered speakers list, I'll just ask if there's anyone else who wishes to speak to this item. Please call toll-free 1-833-353-8610, participant code 43311, hashtag to get on the list before the close. And that'd be my first call. Staff, do we have clerks? Do we have anybody on the line? Anybody else on the line or in the chambers?
Mayor Stewart, the clerk here, and there is no one in the chamber and no one else on the line for this item.
Thanks. And I'll make my second call then. Any speakers who wish to participate, please call 1-833-353-8610, code 43311, hashtag to get on the list. And of course, all that information is available on the live stream and it has been tweeted out. Clerks, I'll just come back to you. Anybody phone in?
This is the clerk here, and nothing has changed. No one on the line for this item and no one in the chamber.
Thanks. And I'll just do my third call. All the information is on the live stream and on Twitter if you want to participate. And what we'll do now, Council, is it's 9:01. We'll take a 5-minute recess to give people a chance to phone in if they want to speak to this. And we'll see you back here. 9:07. See you back at 9:07. checking to see if anybody else is on the line.
Mayor Stewart, it is the clerk here. We have determined that somebody has joined the line, but we're uncertain if they've joined for this item. So we simply have to ask.
Okay, go for it.
So this is the clerk. We understand somebody has joined the TELUS line. Are you here to speak to item number 6? If so, please proceed.
Yes, that is the item I'm calling in regard to.
Great. Could you just let us know your name and...
Sure.
Oh, you're an echo.
The clerk here. We have determined that somebody has joined the line, but we're uncertain.
Caller, could you turn down your...
okay. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Okay, go for it.
No problem.
So this is the... Okay, there we go. Shut it off. Okay.
Hey.
Yes, my name is Eileen Alban, and I'm also a resident of the Elements building, which is directly across from the subject site. And I've been following the hearing online and listening to my neighbors speak, and I just wanted to add my voice and that I echo their concerns and the other items that have been mentioned. I actually sent in a statement yesterday, and it's kind of long, and I don't know that anyone would have had a chance to review it. And it basically covers many of the points that have been brought up, but I just thought I would like to, like I say, add my voice just so that you know there are people that live in this neighborhood and that we are concerned about how it is developed. So basically, I've actually lived here for 16 years. So my concerns about the application are numerous. They encompass the building use, the density, the height, scale and massing, neighborhood context, architectural form and character, traffic, and economic viability. All of these things have sort of been mentioned already this evening, but just to try to hit on them quickly, I think the provision of more than 100,000 square feet of office space on this relatively small site is excessive. I think that the building use is not as diverse as it could be. I think I also am concerned about the rental building, which those units are being completely displaced. And I wonder why the new proposal hasn't considered incorporating some residential use, which could be live-work units or artist studios. That would still contribute to the job-related space, and would also help to animate, maybe the laneway side more than it currently is with the parking entrance and the 5 loading bays. Another benefit of residential would be keeping eyes on the street rather than having the building empty out every day after business hours. I think it would be great to see some more sort of dedicated community amenity space, social service space, cultural space that would be accessible to the wider community and not just people going in to work in the office. And I really would like to see a more diverse, truly mixed-use development, which I think would really be better suited to the Mount Pleasant neighborhood context. Speaking to the density, I think there's some inconsistency in the material because one says the notice of public hearing says 7.5, and then in the presentation it says 7.75. Either way, 7.5 seems excessive in relation to the current FSR of 3. It's 2.5 times the amount. I think, if you doubled it and kept it at 6, you would certainly still have a very generous amount of FSR. And again, I know the whole neighborhood is kind of undergoing a lot of change with the Broadway subway and the new transit station. So I think there needs to be consideration for how much increased density is really needed in this one corner, this one spot. I think speaking to the height, the proposed height of 148 feet at the very maximum allowed by the Queen Elizabeth Park view cone. I don't think that just because it doesn't go above that view cone that it should be allowed to be that high. I think that QE Park is 20 blocks to the south, and I think we need to think more about the immediate context as well. I think 12 stories would be really appropriate at Canby Street or Main Street or Oak Street, but I really don't think it's appropriate at this intersection, which again has been mentioned as a very well-traveled bike route. It's just really out of scale with the neighborhood. As well as objecting to the number of stories, I do wonder why the floor-to-floor height is 11 feet per floor. I think you could just cut that down to 10 feet per floor, and you would lose 10 feet over the height of the building, and that might make it a little bit more palatable. But really, I think a lower mid-rise form would be more appropriate for the site, more contextual. And it dismays me to find out that the Mount Pleasant community plan is not really hasn't been paid attention to in this application, because again, people did work really hard on producing that, and it has a lot of objectives that I don't think should be ignored, which this application does seem to ignore.
I'm going to stop because we're at the 5 minutes, so
Okay.
just wanted to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your thoughts. And there are no questions for you, so I'll say thank you, and we'll move on now to that is the end of the speakers list. Check with the clerks just to make sure there is no one else on the list.
It is the clerk here, Mayor Stewart, and we see no one else on the line, and there is nobody in the chamber.
Okay, thanks so much, Council. So the speakers list is now closed, and we're also going to close the receipt of public comments and move on to hearing from the applicant. Do you have any closing comments from the applicant?
No, thank you, Council. Go ahead.
I have, hi, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening and speak about our proposed development for Broadway, Ontario. My name is Chris Anderson. I'm the CEO of the owner, developer, and I just wanted to say a few words about the building and who we are and what our vision was for this site. There's been a number of comments or questions about the future of office and the size of the retail and things like that. Just so you, we're not traditional developers in the sense of buy, build, and sell. We're not in the residential development business. We're commercial landlord investors, and we generally, when we build or invest, we build to own and hold. So that's always been the plan for this site, as it is generally how we run our business. So when we looked at this site, we thought to ourselves, what a tremendous opportunity to add much needed office space in the Broadway corridor. I mean, I don't think there's been new office built in the Broadway corridor for many, many years. The office vacancy rate in the Broadway corridor has been extremely tight for many, many years, and there's a huge demand for office on Broadway. But there haven't been very many good opportunities for developers to build new buildings. So when we looked at this site, we thought, what a tremendous opportunity. It's close to what will be the new SkyTrain subway line on the Broadway corridor. We'll have the amenities of Main Street and the Mount Pleasant area for office tenants. It's built, as the architect Tom said, in floor plate sizes that are not large by any means. They're not downtown office floor plates, so it will be able to service local office users. It will take a lot of demand out of downtown, the demand from downtown office. And the retail, I know there was some comments about the retail being small or too large, but if you look at the size of the retail floor plate, the ground floor floor plate is the corner unit is about 17 or 1,800 square feet, and the other side of the lobby is only 3,500 square feet. So theoretically, that's 3 1,800 square foot units on the ground floor. So it is not large retail. And whether it's leased to 1, 2, or 3 tenants, it's probably not 1, but certainly 2 or 3. They'll in all likelihood be smaller local, small to medium-sized local tenants, retail tenants. So in terms of the future of office, you know, this office development, like any other office building development, isn't something that happens in 6 months. It happens over years. This development's been in the works from the planning stages, I think, as early as 2017. Here we are in 2020 at the rezoning stage. And the building, assuming we continue along the path, the building won't be built for probably another 3 years. So we're in the business, as I said, of office and commercial ownership and leasing. We're fully confident that there will continue to be a demand for office, notwithstanding the 4-month blip that we've had. But certainly it's been our experience that the demand for office is continuing. And even in the last few months, everybody I've been talking to, most people I talk to are clamoring to get back to their offices. They want to be back in their offices. And they're hoping to get back, if they haven't already, they're hoping to get back as soon as they can, because people generally need the camaraderie of their colleagues in their workspace. That may not be for everybody, but I would say it's for the majority of people. So I don't think office is dead. I think it will continue, and if we didn't think that, we wouldn't be pursuing this development. So those are my comments. I'm happy to take any questions from anybody if anybody has any questions. But we're very excited about this, and we think it will be a tremendous benefit to Mount Pleasant and the Broadway corridor and the City of Vancouver.
Thank you so much for your closing comments. I'll move to staff now. Staff, do you have any closing comments?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Teen Fan, zoning planner. No closing comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. So, councillors, I see a number of you on the list for questions to staff. Councillor Dejanova, questions to staff.
Thanks very much. My first question to staff is regarding the $757,000 contribution towards childcare and affordability. I was hoping staff could tell us how that would be split between childcare and affordable housing, or was it an either or? And also how far an area from where this proposed project is that we could expect that childcare housing to be.
Thank you, Councillor DeGenova. This is Teen Fan from Rezoning. The commercial linkage contribution is a soft allocation, and under the community amenity contribution policy, we see that sites that generate commercial office provide approximately 50% to childcare and 50% to affordable housing. And again, that's a soft allocation, and we determine which projects get what percentage of that allocation at the time of when projects get realized, and it goes through the capital planning process. So hope that answers question 1. Question 2, in regards to how far does the monies spread, the MetroCore area goes as far west as Burrard, and then it touches just past Clark Drive, and then it goes as far south as 16th, and it touches the north side of downtown and the south side of downtown as well. So it sort of covers that geography. And we know that since the commercial linkage contribution has been a policy since 2017, I think we've collected about $20 million for childcare. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, and that does. Thank you very much. That was an excellent and detailed answer. I just had one more question. When could we anticipate the child care that would be coming from this? I assume that it would be child care, maybe some housing contribution. But when could we assume this to be come to fruition, to be put towards child care? How long after the city received this benefit from the developer if successful? Would we see that? And would staff apply that in the community?
Great. Thanks, Teen Fan here as well. The commercial linkage contribution is paid upon enactment. So whenever the applicant does fulfill their enactment conditions, we would collect that money.
Pardon the interruption. Pardon the interruption. This is the clerk here. I'm just checking to see if the chair is still on the line. We seem to be having an issue with the WebEx. Mayor Stewart? We're going to have to take a recess to see if we're able to reactivate. Oh, I'm seeing it starting to come back. Mayor Stewart, this is the...
Yes, sorry, I was off the...
Yes, something happened. Do you know where you got cut off? We may need to back up.
I think I had just asked Councillor Hardwick, and I think I'd stopped when it came back on. I stopped the clock, so I missed about maybe 30 seconds of Councillor Hardwick's question.
I think, if I may, on a point of privilege, Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor Hardwick's clock started instead of my own clock, and it was at 2:08. Staff were just answering a question, but on the honor system, I was still on the queue, but I was somehow moved to the bottom. So that was my 2 minutes and 8 seconds. Thanks.
No, Councillor Dejanova, we actually lost you, and so while the clerks were trying to get you back online, I moved to Councillor Hardwick. That's
okay. Staff was answering my question here, so could I have that answered? It's just the final bit of that question, or
actually, I didn't actually hear any of your question.
Okay.
So what I'll do is,
sorry, Mayor Stewart.
If you're okay, we'll just we'll just
sure.
If you're okay where you are on the list, I'll just proceed with Councillor Hardwick and restart her clock at 2 minutes.
Happy to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Hardwick, please start again.
Okay, thank you. Just so you know, I was disconnected as well and couldn't hear anything.
Great. Okay.
So I did have a question of staff regarding the bike route that goes down Ontario Street there. Have you put that under a microscope? Have you looked really closely at the implications on the bike route as it's connecting down Ontario into Broadway?
Staff, are you on?
Yep. Thank you for your question. This is Rosemary Draskovich, Senior Transportation Development Engineer. So the question is, what considerations have been made for the Ontario bike route? So as part of this application, the applicant will be required to deliver improvements to the bike route adjacent to their site. The detailed design of that hasn't yet been completed, so the changes to the greenway might involve additional traffic calming or closures, or potentially in cases where the vehicle traffic can't be reduced to targeted thresholds that will include like a protected bike lane. So that's what's being contemplated directly adjacent to their site right now. The Ontario bike route is also being considered for changes in a more comprehensive way as well, and that's part of a separate project.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that. I heard the safety concern from one of the speakers and wanted to ask that question. And I'm quite familiar with that Ontario route, a little further south, but I know it's very active. And then I just wanted to swing back around to the Mount Pleasant plan and just the hope that it doesn't seem to have been considered in the same way as the metro regional plans have. We'll be taking a closer look as we examine projects within the context of the Mount Pleasant plan. I'm sure Councillor Weed would have some thoughts on that as well, having been involved in that area. Is it still front of mind, the Mount Pleasant plan, and looking at projects like this, notwithstanding some of the other plans that are going on?
Hi, Councillor Hardwick. This is Teen here from Rezoning. Certainly, yes. We have seen a number of projects come through as the Mount Pleasant Community Plan, especially on Lower Main. number of projects between 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. So certainly depending on the location, and for this specific site, we looked at it through the lens of the MetroCorps plan, as well as sort of the emerging directions through the Broadway plan.
Right. It's really, I think, important for us as council and certainly to our residents to see sort of the hierarchy of the plans as they're playing out on site-specific rezonings like this one. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Weeb, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I have a few questions. The first one kind of follows on Councillor Hardwick. Under policy context, is it possible for projects in the future to include local area community plans, recognizing that there is public realm planning and benefit strategies in those that I don't think would be included in the other plans, which some of them aren't coming to us until 2021?
Thank you for the question. It's Kevin Spans here from Development Planning. It's a little confusing for this particular site because the implementation plan for the Mount Pleasant Community Plan has some pretty specific direction for Broadway East and Lower Main, and those are specific to those areas. This site actually falls in Broadway West, the Broadway West revitalization area, which is referred to in the 2010 community plan document, but not specifically in the implementation document. Now, to complicate that a little bit, the public realm plan applies to the entire Mount Pleasant Community Plan area, and we refer to the implementation document when reviewing the public realm design and approach for this site. So it does apply. Certain elements of the implementation plan apply to this site, and certain elements don't.
Yeah, and that's why I just thought it'd be in the policy context, because there's components that are in, but you're right, there wasn't a specific kind of land use for this area. Second question is, there's a lot of components that have staff comments saying further on with texture building, removing the kind of apparent size of the height, looking at the bike components, looking at increasing accessibility. Recognizing that the proponent talked about how this has been a 3-year plan already, can you explain why a lot of that isn't incorporated into the document we're looking at today? So we'd be looking at the visuals of a building that would better meet the staff direction.
Thank you. Kevin Spans again, Development Planner. Part of it is because there are a number of things that, and it's a great question, and you touched on our conditions that we've written in response to some of the things we've heard about this project. And some of it is because some of the considerations are items that are better suited to a little bit more of an in-depth analysis at the time of development permit application, so materiality, for example. And other ones are really a reflection of the fact that at rezoning, we're looking at an altogether relatively diagrammatic building. It's a honed-in diagrammatic building, but it is something that we always kind of anticipate there needing to be some pushing and pulling to really get right. And you know, honestly, a lot of our conditions are a reflection of public engagement and what we're hearing from the public. And we don't always want to go in and just presume what the public is going to say in response to a proposal. So I should say our conditions are a reflection of what we're hearing from the public as part of our own analysis of the proposal.
Okay, so how do we, in voting for projects like this, give the public the confidence that those will be included in the final project, and so they can feel that their voice was heard and they can see reflected in the design of a project if we approve this today?
Would it be helpful to have a comment from the landscape architect on this project regarding the public realm?
Actually, at this stage in the process, we can only hear from the staff team.
Okay. Apologies.
Thanks, though.
Thank you again for your question. It's Kevin Spans from Development Planning. This is a question that comes up every so often, and how can the public be confident that that we're going to see some design development? And the confidence is really coming in the form of these design development conditions. In approving a rezoning application, you're also approving the recommended design development conditions. In this case, we've got 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and 1.6 were drafted specifically with better fit with the community and better fit with the emergent character of the neighborhood as being important things that need further design development. So as we trace this project through development permit, we always refer back to a rezoning application and the conditions of a rezoning when we take it through to the next stage of approval.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the conditions. I do think they reflect the community. And my time's up.
Thanks so much, Councillor Wiebe. Councillor Dejanova, up to 5 minutes for questions.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I think staff had already answered my first question there. So I'm hoping to have the second question answered. And just to be short, to repeat that again, that was when, how soon after the city received these funds for childcare or affordable housing, as it states in the report, would the city be spending those or investing them into childcare or affordable housing? Do we have a certain projected time frame on that?
Over to staff.
Hi, Councillor Dejanova. It's Tine here from Rezoning. We don't have a projected timeline. I think that all depends on funds that are collected, cash contributions that are collected, and the readiness of projects that could be suitable for childcare and readiness of projects that could be suitable for affordable housing. So those would be sites that would be identified through a process, and then we would take the pool of funds and allocate it to specific projects. And again, council would be approving that through the capital planning and capital budgeting process. So when projects do come to fruition, then council does have an opportunity also to start to allocate those funds because we do seek council approval at that time. So unfortunately, I can't give you a specific location or specific timeline related to that at this moment, just knowing that it does go towards funds and then projects get realized through that.
Okay, I may ask this question again in the future, so just even like an average, eventually, it doesn't have to be at this moment, but an average on sort of the time it takes for that money to be invested, looking at past contributions and how they've been invested would be great. And is this split 50-50?
I think hi, it's Tine here again. I missed, I think, the first part of your question, but I think
is it split 50-50? Is it split equally between childcare and affordable housing, or how does staff determine that?
Yeah, it is, just as I mentioned a bit earlier, it is a soft allocation, so it depends on projects that are being realized at the time and how soon those projects are ready to be delivered, which would then depend on how the funds do get proportion and flow. So 50-50 is sort of what we say as a shorthand, and then it might look differently as projects get realized.
Okay, I'm happy to go back on the queue. I think there's someone after me now, so that's all my questions, but happy to move the motion when the time's ready if there's someone else on the queue, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
I'm not sure where I left off there.
Councillor Kari, questions for 5 minutes?
Yes, I do. Thank you. My first question is related to the comments made by the speaker, some of the speakers around the fact that this project appears to be out of scale for the neighborhood. I wonder if staff can comment on what the plan, the local area plan, the Mount Pleasant plan, and the Broadway plan anticipate for this particular site or section of Broadway. Is it out of scale with those plans, in other words, versus the historic neighborhood?
Thank you for the question. Kevin Spence here from Development Planning. I'll refer first to the Broadway plan just to sort of clear that up a little bit. The Broadway plan is obviously still in process right now, and this project isn't being considered under anything except for very preliminary feedback that we've heard from the community, which you know, we've had some really great feedback from the community early on in the Broadway planning process, and so we want to make sure that some of that was reflected here, because this building will exist within the context of a future emergent neighborhood as determined by the Broadway plan. So it's not impacted by the Broadway plan, but we're using it to direct it a little bit. Now, in terms of the Mount Pleasant plan, again, the specifics of implementation of the Mount Pleasant plan are relatively thin for this part of Broadway. And so what we would then look to would be the existing C3A zoning, which would anticipate a building of about 70 feet high and a density of 3.0 FSR. I can't really give you like a number of stories for that. That would probably be about 5 stories or so. Yeah, if we're looking at kind of base zoning, we're looking at a plus minus 7-story building, 6 or 7-story building at 3.0 FSR.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Second question. Speakers also raised issues around shadowing, and I did look at Appendix D, which they referenced in terms of the spring-fall equinoxes at 10 a.m., and it looked like they were saying at 8 a.m. it would be in full shadow. It's been a big quandary, of course, around this and new buildings and the impacts on current existing buildings. Have we ever contemplated in this city something like a right to light or a right to sunlight?
Councillor Carr, hi, it's Teen here from rezoning. We have certain requirements at the time of rezoning that look at different points in the day depending on the neighborhood and the area. For example, through this rezoning, looked at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 2 o'clock at the spring and the fall equinoxes. Sometimes we go to 3 o'clock depending on the area of the city. We don't currently have a citywide policy on sunlight and solar access, though it could, we do have a lot of best practices that guide us in the direction in looking at certain points of the day at certain times of the year.
Okay, nothing in place though at the current time. Okay, that's great. That answers my question. Question 3, I noticed that the urban design panel talked about the importance of reviewing or suggested reviewing the safety conflicts with the bikeway. I didn't see any conditions of approval around that. Are there specific concerns that they raised that we should be addressing in conditions of approval?
It's Kevin Spence here from Development Planning again, and I'll welcome my colleague Rosemary Draskovich to also answer. But since I was the Dean and I were the staff people that brought this project to Urban Design Panel, their concerns were very general, and we're more concerned about potential visual access limitations based on the location of the ramp vis-a-vis the intersection with the sidewalk and with the cycle access, or with the cycle route. So yes, you're right. It is something that they raised as a concern, and I'll hand it over to Rosemary to address, based on her professional analysis, why there isn't
in just a few seconds here, we're at...
Okay, Rosemary, go for it.
Yeah, so from the engineering perspective, so this is Rosemary Draskovich in Transportation Engineering. From the engineering perspective, we do have conditions to improve the cycling or the bikeway adjacent to the site, in addition to complement the analysis that Kevin and Teen have also mentioned about the access to the parking and the proximity to the laneway access. There's also conditions for appropriate laneway crossings, and as part of the DP review, engineering also does review the parkade access and that proximity to the lane entrance and the bikeway as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing that answer.
Okay, sure, great. thanks very much. So we don't have any other speakers on the council.
Move the recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
That's what I was looking for. Thanks. Do we have a seconder for that?
Councillor Caribbean.
Great, thanks very much. So, Council, we're moving over to a main queue. We are at 9:47. Just so you know, Councillor DeGenova on the list. Up to 5 minutes, Councillor DeGenova.
I won't take 5 minutes, Mr. Mayor, but I would like to speak in support of this project. I really appreciated staff clarifying the intent with the contribution towards affordable housing and childcare. Really appreciated the very thoughtful comments also by the applicant. I could speak to the report, but I think that that's been covered in questions, but satisfied not only with the answers, but also the thoughtfulness of the world that we live in, the new normal, and the importance to have office space, especially for some work that is essential to be done sort of in office space. And I think that it's very important that we consider sort of those more spacious floor plans for certain types of work that essentially need to be there. So for those many reasons, been considering also the number of policies that this meets, because that's really the criteria that I have to base this on. I'm just making my supportive comments above and beyond. I will be supporting this project and really want to thank staff and the applicant as well as the speakers who have come to speak to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hardwick, up to 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. I really would like to see some emphasis put on prioritizing community plans in the context of what's going on with Broadway and what's going on with the regional context through Metro Vancouver. It's really important for the people in the area to understand what is going on here. It's going to continue to impact people in a serious way. This is still early on in the process. And it's important that we don't create false expectations. So that's my message back to staff on this. Clearly, the applicant has done a lot of work. We can trade anecdotes about what's happening in the office marketplace now and going forward. But it does seem that they've taken a lot of careful thought into the design and that there will be further considerations vis-a-vis the urban design panel going forward. I'm satisfied that the safety issues are being addressed. So there's more stuff in the plus column than in the minus column on this one for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carr, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, if I could just add a couple of other points to the points raised. I really appreciate staff being answered to my question around the plans and the fact that the local area plan, the Mount Pleasant plan, I think to quote them, was rather thin in this particular area, so they turned to other things like anticipation of the Broadway plan. And sometimes that is the case. The plans are not always local area plans, are detailed in every single part of a neighborhood. I also appreciate the answer around the shadowing. I have a concern that I've often expressed around shadowing and the access to light. It's something I think we should really seriously look at the city in terms of quality of life. It's so incredibly important. But that's not. It's not something that is in place yet, so not something that we can hold any applicant to in terms of an expected standard. But I do think we should look at it in the future. So, but based on the fact that I think that this is providing a very interesting scale of a commercial space, a 700 square foot floor plates, I think that sort of fits the neighborhood and the region. So. This particular area, so I am going to support.
Thank you. Councillor Weep, just a reminder to Council, we just have 9 minutes left before we hit our hard stop.
As someone that sat on the Mount Pleasant Community Plan and the Mount Pleasant Implementation Plan, I recognize that this is an area, the fleece zone, I think we called it, that didn't have context on heights. And I think that the staff did a really good job in listening to the public and looking at components and add those into the conditions. I would like to see in the future recognizing the importance of the public realm planning and some of the work done in the community plan, that policy statement is included in these documents moving forward, recognizing there was a lot of work by the community. And as we continue to build our community trust, looking at the Vancouver plan, it is important for those comments and that input to be included in all projects within any zone that has a community plan. I do think that there is some work to do on the building. I think on the accessibility, some work to be done on the safety with the bike ramp, as well as ensuring that the building fits more with the neighborhood character. I know that work is ongoing, and I just look forward to seeing how this building comes back, recognizing it's great to see job growth and the proponents wanting to own and continue to have this building in the future and becoming a part of the neighborhood. So I will be supportive of the project.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Weeb. And that's it for comments. So I'm going to call the vote on this item, and if the clerks could cue that. And I have Councillor Kirby-Yung and Councillor Fry. Great. And if clerks could show that on screen. Council, that has passed unanimously. And now that we're pretty tight for time, Council, we're not going to get to our final item, so I would call for a motion to recess.
Motion to recess.
Thank you very much. And we'll be returning, clerks, I believe that would be Thursday at, we'll be coming back on Thursday for to complete the remainder of our agenda, which is the one item on West Prospect.
Second, Councillor Gijanova.
Point of procedure, Mr. Mayor. I believe
it. I just have something. Clerk, go ahead.
Sorry, I was trying to get my microphone on, Mayor Stewart. No, the intent is to be back in the chamber tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
Tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
Yes, so that's Wednesday, October 28th at 3 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Great. And just
recess for a second.
Moved and seconded, sure. But Councillor Kirby-Yung, before I call the vote, you had a point of procedure.
No, that's fine. It was to clarify that it's Wednesday. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry for the mistake, Council. So we'll call the yeas and nays. All in favor of recessing, say yay.
Yay.
Opposed, say nay. Great. Okay. Thanks tonight for your work, Council, staff, and all who participated. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks, staff. Good night.
Good night. Thank you, staff.